something set, but I
Perfect
haven't.
intersection of the sets.
Okay, please be aware that we are being recorded and broadcast to our listening audience, and also video is being taken and broadcast. So, without further ado, do we have minutes to approve? And are those the?
You're in your packet.
Okay, so we are going to.
3 cents.
I have not had a chance to.
Yeah.
Okay, so. Has anyone had a chance to review the minutes? So, would you, I will entertain a motion that we approve the minutes as presented, unless there are corrections or discussion.
They're pretty neat.
There appear to be a fair amount to them, and I have not had.
So, was there precedent for postponing the approval? Yeah, all right. So we will postpone the approval of the minutes until our next meeting. So now we're going to move right into the hearing, which is a hearing of the Guidelines Committee. And for that, I will turn this over to the Guidelines Committee Chair, Mr. Banfield.
Thank you, Mr. Tarpey. So we have heard reports and had follow-up from the town and from the two school committees. And it is our job now to make a recommendation and then finally vote, as we will close the guidelines discussion with a recommendation, and then we'll move on to a vote of that recommendation. So, do we have anybody who'd like to offer anything on what we've heard from various budgeting entities and where we started with our preliminary guideline numbers?
Just reiterate.
Yeah, Mary has one handy, so I'm going to read from that. Thank you. So we had recommended a guideline, a preliminary guideline of 4.13% for the town government, which was an increment of $1 million in the preliminary guideline. They returned with their proposed budget of $1,198,000, which is 4.98% increase, not 4.13. And CPS K through 8, we had recommended a 2.61% change, and they returned a budget with 2.99% change. We recommended $1 million increase. They returned $1,148,268. I think I get the digits right. And the CCRSD, we had recommended a change, and I believe that we are recommending a change in our assessment. I don't think that we're recommending a change in their budget. Have I got that right, everybody? Our change in the assessment, we recommended at 4.27%, and the regional school committee has been wrestling with several options, one of which comes in miraculously at an assessment change of 4.26%. But there are two others that they have been, trying to wrestle to the ground, and those are they really have to do with the balance of how they spend money on OPEB and how they draw down E&D. So I'm going to just posit that 4.26 pretty much meets our guideline within a hair, although the way that was arrived at may not be the most optimal for them regarding their E&D position.
What was 4.26 their scenario 1?
That was their scenario 3. And that, so their scenario 1 was reduce their drawdown of E&D to only use $350,000 and bring their OPEB up to the 785 arc, which put the percentage at 5.31. I'm reading off your sheet.
Reading off
there,
your sheet.
in the sheet. That was scenario one, as we understood it. Scenario two doesn't pay as much attention to OPEB, puts the OPEB down to 600 and uses the full amount of E&D that they used last year. So it leaves those as what we'll call level service or level spend on those two accounts. It's putting aside only 600, which is what they put aside last year. It's not the ARC. And it also draws down 689, 460 from E&D, which is what they drew down last year. Now that has been found to be not favorable by Moody's. Their spend out of E&D has been understood to be not favorable. But that represents a percentage change on our assessment of 3.25. So those are the three basic scenarios.
Do you want to mention?
And there was a memo from Carlisle that.
That's important.
That's, do you want, right, so,
Yeah, go ahead.
so I think,
Yeah, sure.
I did some calculations here based on those slides that Jared presented, and luckily he gave us enough information that I could do this math. So I think Carlisle is recommending that you use 350,000 of E&D and that you fund OPEB at last year's rate, which is 600,000. Is that correct? And I
We
did
did not leave there with specific numbers to work with, but I would say that would be the message we were receiving,
Right.
which you saw in the memo they
Yeah,
sent to you.
right. So I did the arithmetic on this, and it comes out with a 4.58% increase. Does that sound right?
For us or for who?
For just ours, which is about 877,000, or 60,000 more than our initial guideline. Does that feel right to you?
I didn't plug it in, but I can.
Okay.
It's
So it'd be 350 from E&D and OPEB at 600,000. At least that's how I interpreted their memo.
I thought they might be being even more conservative about EMD because they say that replenishing EMD should be a top priority, which replenishing is stronger than slowing down the drawdown.
That's, you're right.
4.58.
And so,
4.58, yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
So, you remain to the end of the school committee meeting?
Yes.
And is the situation still fluid, or have they selected one of the three scenarios?
No, they haven't. Those just presented as, different options for them to consider and, for us to be aware of. So there's been no final direction indicated by the school administration.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah, sure.
When we were talking about the CPS budget, I heard a comment from Dr. Hunter saying that there's about 100 to 150,000 of revenue from preschool that is not given to the CPS budget. Is that correct?
125?
125,000?
Yeah, we met with Chris yesterday, and it sounds like that's a revolving account that can be established fairly easily, at least going forward.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, there's expenses in your budget for preschool, but you don't see the revenue.
Correct.
I'm just bringing that up because right now we're about 143,000 off from our guideline and what they're coming in at. And if there's $125,000 of revenue, that really logically should be.
But does that then mean that there needs to be a reduction in the budget that the town is presenting because they're assuming the revenue?
That's a good question.
Or
I have one other point, and that is, on Monday night, we brought up the issue of Carlisle sharing some of the expenses of running a school district. And Dr. Hunter said, well, she's waiting to hear a memo from Chris, or not a memo, but a sort of a list from Chris of the shared, the things that Concord does, that some of which are shared and some of which are not. I actually brought extra copies of it because people probably don't have it here. But one of the things that we could do is ask the schools, actually, because it's in limbo, because I think Chris sent this to us, but we never did anything with it. I think we could ask we could send this along to the schools and to Chris and say, look, this is something that we think you should consider asking Carlisle to share in now, coming forward. And so that would reduce the amount that Concord would have to pay by, whatever the schools and ultimately end up doing. Like, it could be rent for the bus depot, it could be rent for the Ripley building. There could be other shared costs that Carlisle doesn't currently contribute to. That could reduce the amount that the regional district actually has to bear by itself. So, so that's something I think we might want to consider and ask the school committee and the school administration to think about for implementing for next year.
For 20 or for 21?
For 20.
Okay, just to make
Yeah.
sure that we're all
Clear.
That would be the high school.
For the high school, right, but we're talking about things that would reduce the
town overhead.
the burden on the
Yep.
schools, and this could be one of them. That is, Carlisle won't like it, but asking them to bear their fair share of the cost of running the district, which has been something we've been talking about for years, and we just haven't pushed.
Some of the costs that the town bears, I think, would require the town to get involved.
Yeah, sure. So I think we should move. I think what we should do is move this out of limbo and ask both the school committee and Chris and the town to make a decision about what they're going to ask Carlisle to do.
Yeah, some of that, I think, ultimately it's kind of I just feel as though it's kind of a complicated thing. You need an intermunicipal agreement between the entity called Concord and the entity called Carlisle Regional School District to do this chargeback
No,
deal.
you don't need an agreement. When we built the bus depot, everybody, the school committee, and I believe people from Carlisle agreed to pay rent. And so rent was, the cost of renting a bus depot back in Acton was like $120,000 a year. So that would be, that's something that we're paying for now, but we shouldn't be required to pay all of it. Carlisle's share wouldn't be that much. If you look at it for the overall district, it's 1/4 of 40%, so it's 10%. But that's 12,000. We also provide capital improvements. The school committee had a discussion about capital improvements to Ripley the other night. There are a couple $1 million worth of capital improvements that they're planning on over the next few years at Ripley. The Concord bears right now. Concord has borne all of the costs of improving Ripley for years, and Carlisle pays nothing for that. So we can charge rent for Ripley and recoup some of that as well. And then there's all the other things that Chris listed. Some things like maintenance on the fields, police officers and so on. We could talk about asking Carlisle to bear, and that could reduce the amount the school committee could have to ask Concord for the region.
In the end, what that does is it makes the regional district budget just go up. And then, Carlisle takes a share of that, but the regional district budget goes up.
But money comes into the town too. So it would, the way it goes. Basically, when I said 10%, that means that whatever. So if we charged $120,000 rent for the bus depot, that would be a $10,000, a $12,000 increase that the regional district could not have to worry about. And the same with whatever rent is charged for for Ripley, and whatever shares of the other expenses that we bear.
Focusing on Ripley is a complex problem. Ripley is a multi-use, multi-purpose facility. We're building a STEAM lab that's going to be exclusively used by CPS. There's the daycare program, which is a third-party operation run by a nonprofit that operates out of Ripley. There's our preschool program, our pre-K program, that's part of that. it's in there as well. So the facility
Yeah, figure it out,
has, it's gonna be a complex thing to cut that up and turn it into something that has a Carlisle shape. I'm just saying, it's not
this is
just cut and dry, oh, this is all Ripley.
This is the time to do it. Last year, we took a huge hit last year when our adjustment from the number of students increased. And Carlisle benefited from that. And Carlisle's been benefiting from this generosity that we've supplied all these facilities and services for years. And it's time, I know Carlisle won't like it, right? They're, like anybody, when asked to pay for a fair share, they probably will object, but it's time to ask.
So I think it's good. It's a good idea to have that to open that conversation. I think it's unlikely to presume that the FY20 budget will be able to include it because it's going to require some delicate conversations that are going to take some time to conclude. So I think it's wise, Phil, that we keep that front and center because we do get citizen concerns at all public hearings that have to do with the school budget. We always get one or two comments about this sharing problem that come from the public. So I do think it's something that needs to be sort of swirled and discussed. But to presume that we're going to be able to get it done in the FY20 budget cycle is.
So is it a question that we're really, is germane to the guidelines?
Right, it seems, to me, it seems unlikely that it's germane to the guidelines process this year. But it may be something that we can put in our letter that we send out on next year's program. We expect that something like this will be addressed. We will hope that something like this can be addressed. Maybe that's that will next year's guideline opening letter. Just please. I just don't know that this feels like the 11th hour of a budgeting cycle to be asked.
And it's not really affecting the 20 guidelines, but, I mean,
Well, we did.
we should put an agenda item on this meeting
Exactly.
and do it, yeah.
We did get it. We did get a thing from Chris before we set the guidelines outlining the
Yes, because we asked for it, and he provided it. Yep.
And so we just didn't do anything with it. So I'm just saying now is the time, especially it became clear to me that that wasn't sent to Lori, excuse me, Dr. Hunter. When she answered, she was still waiting the other night for something from Chris.
Can I just clarify, I did get it, I didn't have any direction on what to, I shared it
What
with
to
the
do with
committee
it.
and
Right.
limbo is the right word, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just saying that we ought to move this off of the limbo and let's have the right people deal with it. It may be delicate, it may take a year, but as far as I'm concerned, this was something that was already agreed to, at least the paying rent on the bus depot. I keep reminding you that a bus depot that Concord built and owned was torn down by the unilateral decision of the school committee.
I know.
It cost us $4 million.
Right.
So, and that was 4 or 5 years ago, but that was something that was, when they did that, they agreed, okay, well, we're going to pay rent for the new one. So these are things that are, shouldn't take a year. I think, Carlisle won't like it, but Carlisle's been benefiting from our generosity for years.
I have two comments. One, I agree with several other comments that I don't think really is going to be effectively discussed within the context of this guidelines exercise. However, having said that, I don't think the issue is in any way bound to our guidelines discussions. So we don't have to wait a year. This can start immediately.
December 20th, we'll be on next meeting.
Right?
From an absolute dollar perspective, what would the impact be of doing it, assuming you can even do it this year?
It's not that much. I think, when you get right down to it, it might reduce the Concord share of the regional budget would be, $20,000 to $40,000 or something like that. I don't know, but I'm just guessing because it's $12,000 for the bus depot. Some figure similar to that for Ripley, and then all these other things like maintenance of the fields. The school resource officer is an issue, but I'm not sure that the policeman would actually have that cost included. It wouldn't be, $30,000 maybe.
So I'd like to understand a little more about what the impact would be of not drawing down the E&D, which appears to be what Carlisle is really looking at, and the gap between our contract and terms. What's the absolute, what we're talking about? $800,000? Is that the difference?
Xerox machine.
On the E&D, I'm not, where was the 350?
It wasn't any, they
You made it up.
I made it up. Well, I didn't make it up. It was just the most conservative drawdown that the school had presented to us. So I assumed that that was what Carla was talking about, but actually June points out that they were, she interprets it as they were asking for some.
Yeah.
Well, what does that mean? Does that mean going up to the maximum?
They don't give us a number.
5%?
They don't give us a number.
No, it just means,
They just
at
mean
a
that,
minimum, zero, or, you know, $1 in.
Yeah, okay.
That's how I read that letter. The letter.
I think it's worth looking at that scenario.
So what's the dollar gap then between our guideline and what?
Jared, can you do that? If it's
It'd
zero,
be a
it's
lot.
not up there.
The impact on
If
the
the
number-
is at zero, what would be the percent increase and what would be the difference?
So zero.
Zero and a
Zero and
Zero.
600.
It would go,
A zero drawdown.
Concord would be at 6.69,
You can't.
so $350,000.
Yeah.
And that's at 600 for OPEB.
That is at the full that we get the OPEB. So that is with the 785, with the 600 would be, $5.96.
That'd be coffee,
That's Concord's.
And Carlos would be higher.
So, the sustainable would be over 6. And they've already said that's unsustainable.
Right.
Yeah, but they benefited from like a huge drop
Last
last year.
year, I know, I understand that. But they issued it, their finance committee issued a memo that said they cannot support the 6+ that was coming out. So.
Can I ask some questions about how E and D actually comes about? So is that sort of unrestricted fund balance? Is that what it is?
Yes.
So we assume we're gonna have that? You can't budget for that, right? So that's based on.
It's in the bank and we're gonna draw it down.
Correct.
It's in the bank?
In
So
the-
you have a balance today?
fund balance.
What's your balance?
Well, right now it's uncertified, and we're expecting about 940,000.
So that's the balance.
Unassigned. And then we're gonna assign 689,000 for FY19's.
Okay, so you have $1.5 million in total?
$1,600,000.
And what percent of the total budget does that?
So what they look at is the unassigned, which is a 2.8. But on July, it's confusing, but on July 1st, that goes away. So you have the unassigned and the assigned, and that basically becomes an unassigned. But you're assuming that the 689 is being used to fund the FY19 budget. So right now, we assume that the 940 is going to be our E&D, and that's what they certify, and that's what will be certified probably in a month or two.
And what level do you want it to be at? So where do you guys think a prudent level is for E&D? Or where do the
The
bond
guidance,
agencies
the
think?
guidance that we receive is around some sort of combination of close to or exceeding 4%. So if it's E&D at 4% and no other reserves, or a combination of some reserves and revolving accounts that we can use, such as circuit breaker and E&D to be about 4, a little over 4%.
So what does the 900,000 represent? Is it 4%?
The 940,000 represents 2.8.
So we're a bit below. So is that what Carlisle's looking for? Carlisle's looking for us to go up to 4, do you think?
I don't think they're looking for that.
You don't?
My
Yeah.
takeaway from them was
Can't do
to
it.
reverse the trend with a focus on E and D over OPEB. I don't know that they're ready to say what number. The numbers in the budget I recommended where everything's fully funded were definitely things they felt they couldn't reach.
So,
We ordinarily think about the operating budget separate from capital requests, and I'm wondering if this is a year where we need to think about that in aggregate and potentially table capital projects in favor of both towns accepting a bigger bump increase on the operating side to deal with the EMD and not risking the downgrade, and giving the administration more time to look for ways to fine tune the high school budget. They did a lot of work, but without the debt expense reduction, right now it was, I think when I ballparked it, it was about a little under 1% of cost savings identified. And they've been working like dogs on 2 budgets, so maybe postponing some of the capital projects like parking spaces is something that can get deferred while we deal with accepting a bigger bump on the operating side, so that we don't risk triggering the downgrade that could take many years to recover from.
Makes a lot of sense to me.
So the capital projects will add to the debt load. My assumption is that they're going to bond those. Am I correct about that? So that,
Is that the right way to think about it in terms of debt service that gets billed to the 2 communities?
well, that's the intention. So
In terms
the
of,
point, I guess the point there is that the debt component of the rating agency's concern is less of a concern than the use of the.
oh, I'm talking about the hit on the taxpayer bill.
Yeah, okay.
That, you know, like, if this is all one pot of money,
Yep.
and that we would say, okay, a bigger percentage increase on the regional budget, but try to hold the impact to the taxpayer by looking at the other requests that were going to come from the region that impact that tax bill to the taxpayer. And could we potentially postpone, and I don't, off the top of my head, what the debt service is and the trade-off there, right? Because if you borrow $1 million, you're not paying $1 million the next year out. But taking a look at, are there trade-offs to avoid putting the region through program cuts, or taking too big a step backward on OPEB. But Moody's been very clear that they prioritize getting that E&D balance up over what we do with OPEB in the short run.
We've been very strong here in this committee on funding OPEB. Not to play us off too much against Carlisle, I don't think Carlisle has anywhere near the same concern about that we have.
They don't.
So the question then is, can we, as a finance committee, support backing way off of OPEB? Just saying, okay, this is important to get our ducks in a row in terms of the way the cash reserves are managed, and those future liabilities, kick that can way down the road. I mean, I'm just suggesting it's an option that.
I think it's an option, but I would personally not say way down the road. I would say.
Well, 600 is the floor that we didn't make the arc last year, we had paid 600, but what if we went down to 5 or 4? That may be something that we need to do to avoid the downgrade. Some of these drawdowns are an inherited problem that the current administration is dealing with. Right.
And they need some time to pedal and figure out a way to not be drawing on E&D and funding at the ARC. But to have to go in with a machete to the budget to do it immediately is probably, as opposed to doing microsurgery, you're, on the battlefield and you're dealing with somebody with, a more serious situation. And, I wouldn't want to put too long a timeline on it. It would have to be an understanding and a commitment by the school committee that we're going to address the issue, and that this wasn't just that we swallowed the snake and that we, are permanently funding at next year being up 4% from what we agreed to this year. Does that make sense?
After reading the letter, does Carlisle pay its proportionate share of OPEB?
Yes.
Yeah. The whole regional is its own municipal district, and so it has all the built-in costs of OPEB, retirement, all the pieces are right in there, so Carlisle shares it.
What is the inherent risk of not funding OPEB at the limit that you had set?
Based on the advisory note that Jared Stanton wrote, and I don't know that we all have had that, but somehow we got a copy of it at the last school committee meeting. I don't know.
The Moody report?
The Moody, it was a basic understanding of the structural mechanism by which Moody's comes to their assessments. And debt and future liabilities are 20% of their evaluation process, whereas available reserves and cash balances are 30%. And that 30% also includes components that involve trend of those balances. So since if you look at, it's 20% to worry about debt and future liabilities, 30% they're worried about you have money to pay for those liabilities. That's much more important to them by 10%. And in addition to that, our debt and future liabilities are, I believe, I'm not misquoting, but 89% debt, and the other percentages are retirement and OPEB, which are small, 5 and 7. And these are just off the top of my head, but I think I'm close. So the change in OPEB is vanishingly small in terms of their evaluation process, is the way this has been presented. They're quite impressed that the CCRSD has a high balance, higher than any other district, pretty much in the state. So they're not that worried about how we're dealing with OPEB. We are as a town. We want to make sure we're keeping our retirees whole. It's an overhang of, I want to say, one of them is 5 and one of them is 7 million, or 4 and 6, something like that, million. So these are, they're nothing. But in terms of the overall process through which this bond rating is done, our OPEB, a change for us in OPEB contribution will have a very limited effect, one way or the other. That's my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just trying to restate the case from the school committee meetings.
And it's not an actual, well, it's defined by the actuarial process.
Yes.
Like it's maybe, probably, we're gonna need that.
Yes. Probably.
It's accrual-based accounting, right? So
Yeah.
it's
Yes.
an estimate, you're right, but it's really an obligation that's owed.
Yeah.
If everything collapsed today, you know that.
You'd owe that money.
Those are the benefits that people have earned, so it's
Right.
a real accrual.
It is a real accrual, and it is, and there's there's something that has to do with rates of return and all the rest of that, but it's still it's a liability that sits on the books. And as was pointed out at the school committee meeting, just by the way that GASB is going to work going forward, that obligation is going to be front and center on financial reports that everyone gets and sees. That it's been buried, and it's been hard to find, and nobody cared, but now it's supposed to be front page news in the reporting structure.
It hasn't even been accrued, right? So it's gonna be on the balance sheet.
It's going to be on the balance
It's
sheet.
gonna be booked now.
It's going to be booked.
Yeah, so you're really gonna notice it.
You're going to notice it.
Yeah.
So that's coming attractions. So, we're down here actually discussing the ins and outs of how the committee sets their budget. And I'm not sure that that's as much our concern as whether or not we feel that the number we started with, which is 4.27, is the right number. That's what we're trying to arrive at in this guidelines process. And to meet our number, they're balancing they have a scenario 3 that absolutely meets our number for us. But those two numbers between OPEB and E&D are quite fungible. So if you were to say, we really care more about E&D, we could take, what is it, 92,000 off the 692 that's part of the OPEB number, toss that into the E&D bucket to reduce the drawdown, and just fund OPEB at a lower level. And I don't know what that, if you
We're still-
subtract that off, I don't know where you are, but
We're about 425 for E&D drawdown, which is, in my opinion, too high.
it's still too high.
That's in my opinion. I would just, can I just kind
Yeah, go ahead.
of clarify what I heard June say? June, help me out here. I think what you were proposing is that this year, maybe we allow a bump up in the operating guideline so that we can kind of keep E&D level. Maybe fund OPEB at something that we've been doing in the past, but kind of temper the impact to the property tax of this bumped up in the guideline by reducing debt or reducing any demands for debt or requests for debt going forward. Is that, did I understand you, Kirk?
If that's possible, but Carlisle has, indicated that 5.6 is unacceptable to them, and I don't know that we have a sense for where they would be comfortable, right? So their comment is that that's, twice the rate of inflation.
And where do we want to go?
Yeah,
We don't-
No, I know, but in terms of, we could say that, it's 10%, and Carlisle could come back and say, no, it's 3.
What was our increase last year?
8.5.
Yeah, it's 8.9, so that's about 4 times the rate of inflation last year. So
Yeah.
Carlisle, we were 4 times the rate of inflation.
But yeah, I would look for, or at a minimum, send a message that the dealing with the E&D is a really top priority within the percentage, but I would like some sort of a comprehensive look at the school, the region request in terms of, or is there an eye to delaying additional burden on the taxpayer? Is everything being asked for in that capital budget something that is a must-do in 20 request, or is it something that's in the nice-to-have, but as a community, we could wait and do it a year or two down the road while we digest dealing with the E&D problem?
So just so everyone knows, so there will be some, this will be discussed the other night, some capital requests, or some warrant articles on capital issues like study for schools, but I don't think it's that much for the region. I can't remember what the proposed articles were.
So the regional articles are going to be focused on that feasibility study that's going on right now, which is looking at paving of the roadway, potential for parking, and then some of those other nice-to-haves down the road eventually that I don't think are urgent needs, track, and just trying to scale out the whole site. So we need that study, which we're due to get back in less than 2 weeks, and we'll be figuring out what the priorities are.
You don't have a number for the, for those requests?
We
yet?
don't. That'll be part of those discussions in December.
But we can also, we can deal with that when we get to the point of our position on the warrant articles. And we can signal to them in advance that, given if we do decide to move on the guideline, move on the operating guideline, we're disinclined to agree with much on the warrant articles for this coming year.
Is that debt service that we're going to be not requiring, is that enough to cover the increases in,
I don't know.
No, that's not
Probably not.
No, it wouldn't be. It's a small request, then no, because the borrowing rate's not that high, so.
Right now.
Yep.
Well, one item that I have no knowledge of how imminent the threat is that CCRSD would be downgraded Moody's if we were to maintain the same E&D? Would it happen in a month, a year? I further have no information about what the likely effect would be to us of our, the rate that we would have to pay for our debt would go up without doubt, but by how much, I have no idea. But it strikes me that despite that ignorance, it seems obvious that we should do everything in our power and project the feeling to the school committees that they should do the same to prevent the townspeople from paying more for their debt than they have to. And that should involve shifting priorities so that the necessary contributions are made to E&D to keep the rating agency happy and prevent any increase in our debt cost. That seems primary to me, and then I think discuss other things after that, such as postponing bond issues. And I think, although none of us here knows, I think probably Mr. Stanton could tell us for every $1 million borrowed what the annual cost is approximately. I know it depends upon is it a 10-year bond, is it a 15-year bond? But I'm guessing, what do we generally issue 10-year bonds for this sort of thing, or is it?
20-year.
20-year bonds, so $1 million would be $50,000 in principal, is that, or is it all paid at the end? I don't know.
Yeah. Let me get more information on that. Ian would know that, and I can get it very quickly. So I redact that 20-year.
Okay.
There was another thing. My understanding is that when the rating agency looks at the town's rating, they also consider the regional school districts' circumstances and rating.
So the rating is looking at the community's willingness and ability to pay. And when they're looking at the town of Concord and the town of Carlisle, and they see that we've let the shared region draw down over a period of years, the E&D, that reflects on the two supporting communities' willingness to pay. So that will bear back on Concord and on Carlisle if we let the region slip, if the stated philosophy of what does the municipal rating reflect, if they hold true to that, they're going to say they look less willing.
So what you're saying is, when it comes to Concord, which is going to borrow a lot more money than the region over the next 10 years, that will also affect Concord's rating.
I think that's possible, and I think that that's something that, whether it's Carrie or somebody, that there needs to be a conversation with Moody's so that we really understand how imminent the downgrade is, because John Flaherty has been warning that Moody's has been commenting on it. They finally took the step of putting us on watch list, which frequently leads to the downgrade if you're not hitting those benchmarks that they're looking for. And so,
And they look at us every year, June, or is it every couple of years?
I don't know if I think that they look at it, we would want to verify, but I think it's normally an annual review, especially for a highly rated bond, but that review may come more often if you've gone onto a watch list.
I can answer.
Yeah, we can answer.
So right now, tentatively scheduled, we're on their watch list for the next 18 to 24 months. But when it comes to E&D, which is their main thing, whatever we contribute to the FY20's budget is going to be the FY19 fund balance. So if we do in theory, if we contribute level fund E&D of $689,000, then most likely that our FY19 E&D, if everything stays the same, would be the 2.8. If we reduce it to the 350 and everything stays the same, then in theory, our FY19 E&D would be up to 3.8 in 1 year. They would look at that very favorably.
I mean, there is an inherent logic in their thinking, right? Which is that these are reserve dollars that are there for immediate needs and emergencies, right? And the very fact that you're having to draw down on them has a negative implication versus paying off a future liability. I mean, it's whether or not you pay more for your debt, the logic of just the economics of it seems fairly substantial.
I think it just goes to the fragility of your capacity, and they're just looking out for how well you're going to be able to service your debt. And if the revenue finances become more and more, tenuous, the debt is now going to, at some point, start to be put at risk. So that's where this really is going to matter. That's all. But
So
it's
we've
a very
been,
positive report that for moving it to 350 would move us up to 3.8. I think that's a very positive outcome.
what would the guideline have to be to
And that
allow
was the scenario that you did, right, Mary? Is that what you did?
One of the scenarios was the E&D dry down at 350, OPEB at 600, which is the FY19 contribution, and that was 4.58.
Is that scenario number 2 that he had the other night?
No,
No, this is Mary's.
no, this is something I put together based on my interpretation of the email from Carlisle.
What was scenario number 2? Do you have that?
Scenario number 2 was drawing down E&D by close to 689,000.
That was
Huge drop.
Yeah, same as last year.
Yeah,
With OPEB at 600.
and OPEB at 600, right, and that was a 3.25, so it's way under the guideline, so that's off the table. And then the third one was drawing down E&D at 525. And the third scenario was basically backing into our guideline. So I don't know.
And your number was 457?
4.58.
And what scenario 1, which was the full?
That's
5.31.
Indeed.
5.31.
And of course, that's not on the same little table there, but do you know what the OPEB contribution related to that was?
It's baked
The
in
5.31?
It's baked into the operating.
785. 785.
785?
And I think that's the ARC. That's the ARC for share.
That's the ARC.
785.
FY20 ARC.
Okay, and what was last year's OPEB contribution?
600,000.
So I propose that we call Mary's scenario 1A, because it reduces the ARC contribution.
So what we're saying, you're proposing, sorry, you propose, I'm
So
sorry.
I think Mary's compromise proposal sounds good, and it sounds like it would be consistent with what Carlisle's estimates to do. I don't know what the effect on Carlisle would be, but we'll have to ask him to suck it up. And because besides this, it's also going to be coming, you're going to pay your fair share of operating the district, which you haven't been doing.
We heard that.
So
You're gonna have this conversation.
I move that we change our guideline for the district to Mary's scenario, which is, I call it scenario 1A.
So it's 4.58%, and it's 350,000 drawdown for E&D and a $600,000 OPEB.
So it's increasing our, is it increasing our guideline, like I guess 175,000, is that?
No, it's only 60,000.
Only 60,000?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But before we do that, can you just hesitate for just a minute? We're focusing on E&D and OPEB, and we haven't talked about, are there any other cost savings that we could make to these numbers that could impact the guideline?
There's one big note that the school committee has talked about,
Yep.
and that is their posture towards their laptop program. Right now, their laptop program is budgeted to be a full purchase program where they buy the laptops and then hold them and hand them out each year. And if they were to change to leasing, that would create a one-time reduction in their budget
but that would create a tail where they gotta pay for the lease costs.
So over time it costs more.
It would cost more over time. You get a bump eventually. Even if you're trying to tail out of a lease program, you get a bump eventually somewhere. But in the year one, correct me if I'm wrong, 221,000 is the savings that they would arrive at by going from buying to leasing. So it's not nothing, it's a number.
It costs more at, over the 6 years or so that
You pay,
It's a 6-year lease for a
I
laptop?
don't know what
it's a 4-year lease for a laptop, and they can get 6 out.
3-year lease.
3 years. And they
it costs more in these years.
In the long run.
So in 3 years, you'll have a problem where you've got a tail end that's impacting your operating, and you'll have a,
And you've paid interest on
and you've
it.
got interest. Yeah.
So that's,
Yeah.
so they're,
Anything else?
I'm doing my best. How am I doing, guys? I'm doing all right. I don't know that there's any other big numbers. They have to face up to a problem they deferred last year, which is their math program is a software purchase, which they had a 3-year.
No, that's at that's at CPS.
Oh, that's CPS. I'm sorry. I'm in the wrong budget.
I get it confused.
Yeah, so that's fine, sorry.
Okay.
All right, so, yeah, these are the 3 levers that they've discussed.
So,
And on the salary side, that number is not fixed, right? Because they
Yep.
still have to work with the contract
Yep, that contract doesn't get renegotiated until next school year.
next school year.
so Phil, you want
So yeah, my motion is that we change our guideline to what I'm calling scenario 1A, which is Mary's proposal.
4.58%, which will include a $350,000 drawdown of E&D and a $600,000 OPEB contribution. An increase of 877,508.
And then what does that do to our overall?
Is that, my number's correct? My number's correct?
4.58, yep.
And that's an 877,508 increase over your FY19 assessment?
So that's like a $60,000. It's a 60,000.
It's not me.
So they are.
Could I just clarify? So
Go ahead.
if you are reducing the draw on the E&D to 350,
Yep.
that's 175,000. Right, you're increasing the cost by 175, but
what?
you're reducing,
OPEB.
okay, we can say it the opposite way.
Go
But
ahead.
we're adding 175 into the budget, but you're taking out 185,368, right, by reducing the OPEB.
Right.
So that's a net decrease
Of
of
when-
10,368, right?
What's
So you're reducing in theory the FY19 budget by 185,368. OPEB is staying the same based on the recommendation. Therefore, Concord's assessment delta between 19 and 20 would be 877,509.
509, okay, right, exactly, which is, up here you had, with our guideline, we had 817,500. They're going to see, I'm putting it as a wall. Yeah,
Yeah, you gotta do the splits between Concord and Carlisle and get the real number.
so, it's cell M, H, I don't know.
Now, just so we're on the same page with the Carlisle memo, was our original 4.27, what does that drive them to? And I think they would be close to.
That would be scenario 3.
Yeah, scenario
So
3, what was
scenario
that? Okay, so I look at scenario 3.
They're at
Scenario 3,
4.07.
I'm looking at Carlisle assessment. and see-
4.07, the back page.
With debt, yeah.
So, well, no, the Carlisle assessment with debt is 407, 545 without debt. So that's probably, they're just gonna have to look at it.
But the debt is lower because our debt service goes down.
Yeah,
isn't it?
Yeah, debt service.
Yes.
We're paying off high schools.
So far.
So, yeah, there's. We can always put something back in. All right, so I have a motion on the table, as I said, do I have a second for that motion? Okay, you have a second. Discussion.
One other question, so that makes the overall increase to the cumulative increase to the three budgets, what percent?
Well, we haven't talked about whether we want to adjust CPFs or the town. We need to, let's try to get to this.
So Carl just wants to see what that is, what
Yeah,
those
yeah.
increments
Okay,
So
are.
yeah.
did you put that in there, Carrie, at the eight, where you have 81750?
That's a plus 60 then, right? It's plus 60.
You got it, there you go, yep. So what's that come out to be? 3.53. So we were at 3.45 and we were up to 3.53. So what does that mean for property tax?
Pretty much this line, kind of 3.3, about 3.
So
So we have,
So Carrie, that makes sense.
Going down.
Not really.
Not really.
what?
Well, I'm just, I understand the assessment, but if you are, we're adding 175 to the budget, and we're taking out 186. I don't know how that results in an increase
Say that
on a
again?
budget basis or an assessment basis.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
If you're adding $175,000 worth of expenses, right, because we're not using as much from E&D, but you're reducing your OPEB by 186,000.
If I may.
Because
So
the
the original,
350 drawdown just gets counted as one of the non-tax revenues. It doesn't really show up as a budget line, is that right?
correct, but the 350 was the original recommended. So that is in the original, that is in the 5.31 that I.
So we're not,
So it's really the only decrease is the 185 to
185
86.
off of OPEB.
Does that make sense? to you?
that makes sense.
Okay.
So what is the impact of just keeping the guidelines committee then?
I'm sorry.
They just have to go figure out how to come up with this.
We don't decide what it's going to put in, right?
We don't decide.
We pick it
So
up.
we could just, so we could just say, tough.
I know
this is
You're increasing your budget.
so,
Right, we could say within your budget, we.
So if this was, can I just, Carrie, if this was the only change we made, so we keep the other guidelines the same, we loosened this guideline a little bit, what's the impact to the property tax based on what we know now as far as all the other moving parts?
It's about 3.3% because the overall budgetary increase is 3.53.
Yeah.
Right, so here's my 3.55
Yeah.
line, so
Okay,
the impact is,
so from 3.21 to 3.3. Did I read that? Okay, thank you.
Do we have any thoughts about, well, let's stay on this question, should we, any more discussion on this motion? Hearing none, I think we're ready for vote. This is just on the motion to change our guideline on the CCRSD assessment number.
So, and this is subject to being revised again after we discuss GPS and town, right?
It is, it's still.
This is just a tentative.
Well, this is the beginning, this is the starting point. So do I, ready for a vote? All those in favor of this change? All those opposed to this change? Okay, we need to count.
Can you do that again?
Yes, let's, all in favor, hold them up, Anita.
Can I just ask a question? Are the people that are opposed?
Is that all?
Oh, that's all, yes. Are the people that are opposed, basically saying we should stay with our old?
I think that, yeah.
We have it up
Yes.
They're
That's
gonna-
what I'm saying.
Well, that's part of the
There's a
discussion.
Okay,
Yeah,
all
I
those
mean,
opposed?
Oh, opposed. 6.
It's tough.
Okay, it appears to have failed. Any abstentions? No abstentions, okay.
6 to
So it
6.
appears to have failed. We're still at our previous guideline.
Which is a 4 point something, what is it? 4.27%. Yeah, it's not.
Right. No, it's not contingent. No. And they provided a scenario in which it was arrived at.
But the scenario it was arrived at was drawing down E&D significantly, so we had a direct.
Well,
Which is
the
not-
scenario could be,
They have
changed to
letters,
draw
yes, they
down
could
less.
letters, you're right.
It's just,
Right.
those numbers can be
I see, yeah.
moved around.
Yep,
Um,
okay.
Even the
So-
lease equipment issue, I mean, it's not our job, I assume, to comment on that, but there are issues with obsolescence with technology, which might make leasing the best scenario.
The experience with the laptop program has been that the laptops appear to last approximately 6 years of useful life. And they get 6 years of life out of those laptops, which is pretty impressive, actually. And that exceeds by 3 years the lease length, which is only 3. So that's the word from the school. All right, so given that that's a vote, we should just move on to the other 2 lines in our guideline and see if these, by the way, are sadly, they're recommendations to the full committee. So it's we're in a funny area here, but let's carry on.
So we'll have to vote again as a full committee.
Yeah, weirdly, we can vote as a package deal once we get that done. Vote as a package deal, but anyway. So returning to our original numbers, we were at 2.61. The school committee has looked at and hasn't, I don't know if they've got an approved budget, but their current budget is at 2.99. So it's close. What's the dollar rate? It's 198, I think.
143,000.
143. We're off by. I'm unaware of any major budget drivers that have a lot. There aren't a lot of levers that are similar to the OPEB.
You're leaving the CCRSD?
I'm happy to entertain. We tried for what appears to have been a $60,000 increase. If you would like to discuss it further about maybe decreasing it or changing it, making it lower, we can entertain that. What would you?
Some other increase.
Some other increase is possible.
Well,
I mean, 60,000 to me is a relatively, on a 30-something million dollar budget, is maybe it's 20-something. Region.
Except that it's moving in the wrong direction.
I know.
I mean, it's, you can speak of it as being trivial, but it's.
That's fine.
It's in the
Well,
wrong direction.
would you like to talk about us moving 4.27 down to a smaller number? I'm happy to.
Right, no, I personally would like to see it stay at our guideline at 4.27. We would like whatever steps are necessary to restore the E&D account to a number that will keep the rating agency happy. And if that means a reduction in personnel or programs, that would be what it is.
Well, at 4.27, they brought a scenario that it's their responsibility to set their budget. And if their budget is 4.26 and they make choices, that's their choice.
Sure, but I think we should make the strong recommendation that no choice be made that will result in a higher debt rate.
we have that. Recommendation.
Yeah, we can make a recommendation, but ultimately, they're gonna put a value on the education of the kids in comparison to E&D. So we don't have a lot of say-so in that.
I agree with Peter on that. We are asking them to meet a certain budgetary threshold, and how they meet that is their responsibility. We can put some flowery language around that, that's fine if you'd like.
Sure, but speaking as a taxpayer, I would say if they make choices that result in me paying a higher tax bill because they have made choices that resulted in a higher debt rate, I'm going to hope to see that, I'm hoping to recoup that at some time in the future.
Fair enough. I do believe that the school committee is sensitive to this issue. If we can take the step that Carlisle took, craft some advisory note that makes a strong statement along those lines, Tom, would you like to have us, would you want to give us a motion on that? Like this is pretty detailed information that Carlisle provided.
Mm-hmm.
We want you to focus on this. We think this is not doable in the current scenario. We could put a paragraph or two together that say we are strongly urging you to focus your efforts on the reduction of ED in order to continue to make progress against the negative scenarios.
Sure.
I mean, would that be, I think that's all we have is a persuasive capacity to write them.
Either be in a FinCom report or, I forget whether we do another letter.
We don't usually. I found this memo to be somewhat unusual. I don't think this is.
Well, I'm just saying it can be part of our overall presentation of the budgets to the town, like in a FinCom report or something.
Yep.
So if we do that, we're pushing the school committee and administration to move towards like a leasing scenario for a laptop program. So unless they want to cut programs or personnel, which I just think is going to be imperative. So I think, we have to understand when we do this, and we make these recommendations, we're pushing them into this laptop leasing, which is fine. It's just, it's going to cost us more in the end. It's going to cost us more 3 or 4 years from now.
I disagree. I don't think we're pushing them into anything. I think we're just saying that we want to preserve the excellent debt rating that we've got. And we want them to make whatever changes they need to do to run their budgets prudently and maintain that debt rating.
I'd love it if they can find another 60,000 or 150,000 cuts. But I think they've already found a lot of cuts. I don't know what the number was for the region. I know it was over 1.8 million for CPS. I just don't see them meet that. There's not much more left.
And I just want to say that, I really appreciate the way the school committee has, and the administration has presented it, because they really came to us and told us the way they're going to manage it, given the allocation that we're talking about, and talk to us about E&D. They didn't come to us and say, well, we're going to have to start cutting all these teachers, which we know where that ends, right? That gets everybody all riled up, and then a lot of times the school community rallies behind them, and we lose.
We have a disagreement. Not resolved.
Right. So this is really about, I think, working together as much as we can, and I felt like they have done a really good job of going through the budgets thus far. And as we've talked about, it's the contracts. That's where the money is, and they haven't had the time yet to deal with them. So let's hope that they do when the time comes. So I'm disappointed that we didn't actually meet them at that number, but so be it. but I don't think we can take it any further and tell them how they're going to do it, because they're going to do what they need to do. They've got other constituents to answer to besides just the finance committee and the taxpayers. We're all taxpayers, but they've got the excellence of schools to keep in mind as well.
So I have also just one more wheeling and dealing before we leave this. So the original proposal was 60,000 increase. I propose that we have a $30,000 increase, and here's additional rationale besides just for the baby. As I mentioned earlier, there is money to be recovered from Carlisle if we were to push this issue of shared services and shared expenses. And I estimated $20,000 to $40,000. $30,000 is the middle point. So if we can add $30,000, that'll make it a little bit easier for them to manage this.
Oh, second. It's not, money isn't the baby, we can split money.
That's right. So it's just make it a little bit easier, that a little bit closer to what they were proposing, and give them the leeway to, maybe avoid making some harder choices.
I want to make a comment.
Yep.
The
We're open for
4.27,
discussion
which we're holding to, let's remember that was a pretty arbitrary number. That was, well,
It wasn't arbitrary. It was actually arrived at with a great deal of help from the school committee.
We,
the 4.27?
yeah, we actually added some numbers for, like, if you did this with D&D, if you did this with OPEB, if you got this from your debt, some of your debt reduction. We had a little column of numbers on the side of the spreadsheet that we sort of used as a
Okay, I wasn't in
jumping
that
off
meeting.
point to
Okay,
arrive
sorry.
at that.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
It's my fault. Okay.
So back to Maker Ground, the increase in our original guideline, 4.27, was 817,500. I move that we push it to 850. 32,500 increase.
I'll second.
Yes.
Oh, he's
So he needs a revised motion, so it's now been do we have any further discussion on this motion to change this? And the new number becomes 4.44, is that?
Yes.
4.4. And 3.49 the overall where we are right now. So, hearing no further discussion, let's have a vote on this proposal to move that up.
Can I just ask you just one question to your proposal? Adding another 30,000, on the spectrum of outcomes, one of those scenarios is we allocate another 30, but theoretically, they don't have to use that 30 for what we hope they use it for.
That is true.
That's correct, they're managing their budget.
Right, so we're still in the same place, but giving an additional 30.
Yes, we have to hope, based on the presentations we've heard, that do what we're asking.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay, y'all in. Okay.
And do what they said they're going to do.
Right.
It is a
There
matter-
really
there
hasn't
is
been
some
any
trust.
further discussion on the other underlying components of their budget, which they seem to be settled in on, so let's have a vote on this. All those in favor of the proposal at 850,000? All those opposed?
Seven to five.
7 to 5. No abstentions? Nope. No vote. So we've moved the number. Okay.
Got one number, now we have two.
Yeah. We're up to-
Oh my God.
We're at 8:15.
And I'm looking at
We're at 8:15.
I know.
Okay. So on the 2.61, so we're off by 143,000 there.
I don't think we have a similar conversation around that 143,000. There are no big levers that have been offered in terms of the presentations regarding the CPS budget. So this is a little bit more of we just don't have enough further information.
Can I ask you a question? Do we have a basis for the 2.61?
The 2.61, if I recall, took the anticipated amount that was budgeted for salaries and then just said, you're doing zero-based budgeting, work with the rest of your entire organization and bring that in totally level. And you've already told us you need this for salaries, and so we kind of let that be the driver, and then everything else, we were hoping to find savings. And that's kind of how we arrived at it. I'm not trying to minimize it. There was a reasonable amount of discussion, I think, around the number.
Okay.
That's kind of how we got there.
Okay.
And if we look at their presentation,
Salaries are 1.1.
their salaries are 1.1, so that's close to,
Right.
it's the salary budget
Okay.
driver is at 1.1,
Because
which.
So we assured ourselves that our recommendation, in our opinion, was feasible.
yes, that's what I was saying.
And, yeah. So,
It wasn't what we got back.
yeah, well, you know,
So let me just be sure, the 2.61 was put out there because we thought that would cover the necessary increases in salaries that are contractually driven, right?
right.
But then when the superintendent looked closer, we found out that in fact the salary increases that we're bound to contractually are 1.1 million.
But we also didn't know at that point what savings were going to be discovered.
Yeah,
We
we
only had one
just
part of the
really felt
equation
that,
here,
you know,
right?
there-
We didn't have.
exactly, we didn't have any,
But they've
if
got
you were-
cost drivers over and above their salary,
Sure.
which are being funded by cost savings.
Right.
So the additional 143 would do what to the cumulative number?
2.99%.
No, 2 point, the cumulative for the
Yeah.
whole.
Carrie, can you do that for us, please?
Wrong one. It looked really bad. Oh, that's still
That's
not
not the
right.
right number, there you go.
Oh, let's start over again. I'm really-
There you go. That's it.
Good, thank you.
Now we're, yeah, we're down
3.67.
4. We're down to 3.42 tax increase. There you go.
Without,
Oh, the salaries.
without that increase, we'd be about 3.25.
Okay, let me make sure I understand what I'm looking at. If we go to the higher guide, the 2.99, which is the request right now, our taxes go to 3.42%.
Yes.
From what they are right now, having given what we voted for the high school, it's 3 point.
Got it, thank you.
Did I say that right, Karen? We're at 3.3 now for a tax increase with the change to the high school, but then if we go to this, we're at 3.42?
I think we were probably, I think Phil just said 3.25 was probably closer.
And we go up to 3.42 from 3.25.
And it's just so, point of clarification, so the 143, the delta here is with level set contracts, is that, did I understand that correctly?
Yes, yes.
What was the increase to the CPS budget last year?
while we're looking that up, I just did it back of the envelope. We are discussing a number right now, which is going to eat into our unused levy capacity by 20%. So we're talking about what's, where we are.
Say that again.
We have a $4.185 million unused levy capacity. Based on where Kerry just drew the blue line, we will consume 817,000 of that, which is about 20% of our unused levy capacity, 1/5 of it, in 1 year. So we know what we're, and this is the thing we're up against. Is that we're chewing through this every day.
This just highlights for me again how much the salaries are driving the spending.
It's the whole thing, right? The
It's
cart's
not-
driving the horse. It's
exactly.
like,
It's-
so you negotiate contracts, it drives everything else, and nothing else matters, right? It's just, everything else is irrelevant.
Right now, we're not gonna change the salary status of these two budget entities.
Right.
Negotiations.
But it's available to make the
Yes.
observation. But again, it's like,
I understand that.
And all we're doing is playing catch up to stuff that was approved before.
Yep.
If we keep saying yes, 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 we're gonna do the same thing next year. I mean, we've been through a bunch of cycles already.
But a lot of these increases, and we just found 1.8 million in savings. A lot of these increases have been things that weren't salaries. They cut a few personnel. There was like one full-time equivalent in administration, and I don't know if there's any others. So there was a lot of these increases over the years were just wasted money that they found now. So I don't know. On this one, was it 4 point the increase last year?
Last year was
3.9.
1.436 million.
So how much was that?
what percent?
3.9% last year.
So I move that we keep this the same.
I second.
We keep what the same?
The guideline.
Our guideline, 2.61.
We have a discussion.
Which is 143,000 less than,
Than their current budget that they're working with.
right.
And they have no levers because 96% of their increase is salary. Is that right?
1.1 million, this is a salary driver.
And that's always the case in town and schools. The salary drives everything. Everything else is,
Right.
is
No, not everything. There
virtually
was
everything.
$1.8 million in savings that they found last year. So they could have come to us for a much less, a smaller increase last year.
But once you find that once, it's the driver,
Yeah,
it's,
Right.
everything else is statistically or not financially.
But we
relevant.
still have all this money that was wasted.
Oh, totally, they're doing, I think they're doing great
They're
job.
doing a great job now.
But, and you guys inherited the stuff you inherited, but here it is, next year's salary year, it's the same thing, that we're
That's why
always
we-
on the receiving end of it.
So I think it's to make a statement before the salary negotiation comes up, I think,
Otherwise, you
And,
just catch up.
if I'm staying true to the fact that I believe the drivers are the salaries, and that the way we get this under control is really to send that message, right? The school committee did make a decision to even up the steps between CPS and CCRSD. And that was something, when I was on the school committee, that was continually asked for, and we kept turning it down because we knew what a big cost driver it was. So, and I don't know exactly what they got in return for it, but the fact is that it's costing us a lot of money to do that. And that's a decision that was made by them to do that.
So it behooves them to figure out how to pay for that.
Yeah.
So I just remember last year's town meeting, they tried to explain the purpose of that science lab at Ripley. Nobody could explain it.
Steam lab.
STEAM lab. Try to explain, this is the CCRSD, try to explain those cement signs out there. Like, 150,000 for cement signs, 300,000 for a STEAM lab. You can make better choices, and those are things that they decided to do. I don't know why they did it. I think the STEAM lab's a complete waste of money. I can't imagine busing kids across town to go with. But anyways, those are things that they can choose not to continue to pay for.
Okay.
I think we've talked about that.
Yeah.
No, when are we gonna let this go?
Okay.
No, wait a minute.
Yeah, really.
I said, yeah, well,
You have a motion on the table.
So glad you guys did it. Oh my God, this is so
Right.
refreshing. Greatest thing.
Thank you, Scott.
Oh my goodness.
It's okay.
Further discussion on the motion, and let's just be clear what the motion is, that's to hold this at 2.61%. Okay, all in favor of holding at 2.61%? Any opposed, any abstentions, seeing none? Okay, unanimous. Okay. Now the town.
They're about 200,000 over.
That's about
the guide.
This is
198.
Gap is how much?
198,000.
198?
For 198, oh, for the tier one,
I'm sorry.
for the tier one. So the town manager presented, the 1,198,000 was the tier one, but the full request, there was a tier two that was 235,000 or so. So the delta of those together is 433, which is what I posted.
Yeah, he broke it down into necessary, needed, and, right. So if we funded the needed, it would be another 235. If we funded necessary, it's 198 over the million that we have advertising.
So, what were the main things that are being added this year? Is it the ambulance?
No, that's not.
IT for the library. IT for the library, and bringing the union people, the non-union people up to union, so 950,000. That was the big one.
We have to add in the continuation of the resource officer that we added at the special town meeting.
That was 41.
And they're drawing down from that special fund.
There was only 10 grand this year.
Yeah, it's not that.
The big one was the 950,000 for the salary increases.
The chart is in the November 8th minutes that you have in your packet,
Thank you.
page 1.
We didn't have enough time to review, so.
But we have a meeting here.
Can I ask a question? What was the basis, do we have a strong basis for the 4.13% guideline? Or was
I
that
think once
arbitrary?
again, we looked at the chart and it's, we saw the nut for salary at $1 million and just said, okay, that's the.
Make it $1 million.
Make it $1 million. I believe that was fundamentally the way that went.
Okay, but unlike the schools, we weren't expecting them to find savings to fund any other.
No, I do think that John did ask the town manager, are you considering a zero-based approach? And I said that, no.
Talking about a new town manager.
That's right. Okay, so it was the salaries.
So it seems like there's a lot of room in that $950,000 increase.
Yeah, I mean, 4.1, still, that's pretty generous. What do you mean by that, Bill?
Yeah.
That he's increasing all non-union salaries by some, whatever the percentage.
2.5.
By 2.5?
Yep.
But does he have to do the whole 2.5? Could it be reduced to 2.1 or 2? And if I'm just doing proportions, that'd be 1/5 of 95,000, not 950,000, or $20,000. So that would be more than his gap. So, you know, it doesn't have to be a full 2.5%, I would say.
Can you, Carrie, can you shed any light on the composition of that 950?
Yeah, so I've just,
I had a different understanding from Phil's understanding.
yeah, so I just highlighted on the screen this, I haven't updated this since we backed the number down. I think this original calculation assumed a 3.5% COLA for non-union, and it is broken down. 340,000 of it was for non-union salaries, 440,000 is for current year, and 220 for retro, for contracts that at the time this was put together weren't settled, since have been settled and are in the process of being.
So the 220 and the 440 are non-discretionary numbers, is that correct?
Yes.
But is that a 3.5% increase?
The 340,000, I believe, represents a 3 or 3.5% increase, because we brought that down to 950 when it was updated to the 2.5%.
During the time when the union contracts were being negotiated but were not settled, was there any set aside for the possibility of increases, or are we paying the full nut for all that retro in the future year?
No, it is set aside, but this would be to bring the base
Right.
in fiscal 20, what we would need in fiscal 20. So we have money set aside in the current fiscal year to pay. We have one contract that we have retro back into fiscal 18. So
Yep.
in 19 we have funding for what is owed in 18 and 19.
Okay.
But then we have to bring the bases that we use to project the salaries
I see.
up in 20. Is that okay?
That shows somewhere else.
So, if I just do a rough calculation, if you reduce that 340,000 to a 2.5% increase, it'd be 242,000. So, that would save, and you already reduced it, that 1 million by 50,000, right?
Mhm.
So, you basically, an additional, saving $50,000 basically, to reduce 2.5%. So the gap would go from, what is the gap now?
198,
198 to
150.
1,000 less than this.
148.
Looks like there's some things that could be done.
All this discussion, we're just reacting again, right? Which, can't wait to get to the STR discussion, because
It gets there.
it's hard, right, but just for context, right? It's hard to believe that a 4.1% increase, is it enough? Like, you gotta make it work, right? And so we can always, again, look at programs and we wanna add this back and this back, but we're missing the whole point again, I think, right? Which is we're reacting to labor that's already done. And I think our job is to say what we think the town can afford. And it just seems hard to believe that we think the town should afford more than 4% increase in any line item. That's the context again. I know that's like item number 2 on the agenda, but we're just so in the weeds, and we're so in the weeds at numbers that are all way higher than I think we should be at. And I understand you can't deal with anything, but if the number one thing out of this is sending the message again, all these numbers are too high. And if labor grows at crazy rates, whatever crazy as related to anything else, right? Whether it's coal or anything else. Again, not disparaging the people or any of that stuff. That squeezes out everything else, all of the programs, and you have zero growth in programs if your rates of wages are higher than we think our sustainable growth rate is. The rest is all just, we're just reacting. So I think our job is to say, again, it's, and we do it year by year. what we think is a reasonable rate that is a burden on taxpayers, and the rest are details. We can't go into the budgets anyway, so I think it's just purely symbolic and sending a signal of what we think we can afford.
I'll just give one more data point. I did a calculation down at 2%, and you got to save another $68,000. So that would put the gap at $39,000.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I think that what Carrie's telling us is that what's really requested is necessary and needed, that those two columns together are 433. It's a big distance. I mean, we're looking at necessary as 198. But what Carrie's saying is that the town mayor is actually proposing the necessary and the needed, which is 596. So that just feels really stiff.
What was their increase last year, you know?
It was, I got 986.5. I think that was about, I don't know, when we went through so many revisions, I'm not sure.
Yeah, so I heard at one point that the schools were getting a much larger proportion of the town was getting, but if you got 4% last year, I don't know if that's a reasonable bump last year.
I mean, the only comment that I would make looking at some of these numbers that to me is a little concerning is the requested, which we're not even talking about, includes staff for some of the scope of responsibilities that are coming out with White Pond and some of the other areas. I mean, I'm just coming on the overall, how are these numbers ever going to work? Just how are they going to get the staff they need to manage that if that's not even in either of these numbers?
The White Pond thing is just eventually supposed to take, run on its own. Self-fund,
But I think it's a good point to say that some of these things are things that the town has already voted that they wanted, without maybe thinking through the impact of the operating budget, and now we're seeing this is the impact of the operating budget, so we can't we voted for a sustainability director, it's time to pay for that. We voted for the Giroux land, we've got to have people there to maintain it. We voted for White Pond. For a short period of time, we have to be able to supplement the user's fees until it gets on its feet. So there's some of these expenses over and above the salaries are things that the town voted for, and now the bill's coming.
I guess that's my point is, their scope, it's not as though their scope has stayed the same, their scope has actually increased. Whether we agree or
By the will of the
disagree.
town.
Yes, so then it has to be paid for, but it's not even in these numbers, those salaries aren't even included in in the 4.98 or in the 5.6.
Some of them are.
The sustainability director is
The sustainability director
necessary.
is the Giroux and White Pond and
The sustainability director is what you did. Right there.
Yeah.
It's,
That's only
It's
a
a
portion.
mass,
Yeah.
I also think it's important to keep in mind that the 89,000 for this year's appropriation for the
firefighters.
ambulance service in West Concord, A, does not include any non-salary allowance, and B, is just the first-year cost.
It's on the way to
future years,
350,
it's
right?
going to
That's right.
increase
It's
up to,
$350.
you know, it's going to be.
I didn't know we were talking about that.
Well,
I thought that was
we're-
off the but apparently it's in the needed column.
No, it's in the 235.
It's in the four, whatever total, like the 4%. Yeah.
It's in the Kerry gave it, yeah. But Tom's right, that's 89,000 does not cover four new firefighters.
Yeah.
I think we calculated the full bill at 318.
Yeah.
Yeah, 320 is the number I remember.
So this is a distortion of what we're committed to.
Well, if we
Well,
if we
it's in the
add that
reflected
in,
out.
we're
this would be another one of these things that future FinComs are gonna see as being a budget buster, but it's gonna be unavoidable. We've hired the 4 firefighters, we have the service, and we've increased.
Well, we didn't hire them yet.
Well, that's what I mean,
You're
if
saying
this,
if you agree
if this
with the
goes
first
through and it
year.
gets done,
But once they're hired, it's unthinkable to.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so because part of the fixed request,
Right.
absolutely necessary. So just to move this off of discussion, I move that we add $40,000 to this guideline. And my theory was trying to calculate what what a 2% increase would be for the employees. But, I don't feel that strongly about it. 4.44 is on pretty generous. But I'll move the $40,000 increase to cover that up to 2%.
Sounds feasible.
4.44?
No, 4.44 is our current. I'm
No,
at 40,000.
We're at 4.13.
So 890.
It goes from 1.040.
It goes to 4.29.
Yeah, I see that. I don't know, 4.4, what are you talking about, 4.4?
Oh, I'm sorry, what's
It's
the town?
4.13.
4.29, I'm sorry. It adds to 4.29.
No, it adds to 4.13, it bumps it up to 4.29.
Oh,
Go across that road.
Sorry, 4. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was 4.29.
Which does swap to the community.
And then now we're at 3.54, which puts us down at 3717.
3.3.
Levy capacity, split, and 3.3 tax increase. Well, do we have a second for Phil's motion? Wow, okay. It's not.
It's more befuddlement than just.
I know, yeah, I agree. It's befuddlement, I agree.
Well, then I move that we close the question.
If you don't get a second.
Well, that's been, has to be retracted without a second, it's not a, that's not a thing, but now what I think you're moving now is that are you moving that we just accept our 4.13, is that what you're
Yes,
moving?
yeah, I move
Okay.
that we call a question on all the tentative guidelines that we voted so far. And just since nobody seems to have any other proposal on the town, we vote what we have on the board.
Second, just doesn't. Okay, it's seconded, we're having some discussion on this particular point. Given the proposals made by the town manager, I just find that I don't know how he's gonna do it. That's all, but that's, we could look at the firefighters and the expansion of the ambulance and say, okay, we don't do that. But even if you're in the necessary category, you're at 4.98%, and we're saying, no, I don't think so.
Here's where I struggle, is exactly this, what we talked about, is that the voters voted on these things. They value them. Not all of them, but the will of the town,
Will of the
people who voted.
250 people who may have showed up
No,
at
no,
the
no, I
special
don't
town
mean not
meeting.
all of the people. I mean, they didn't vote on all of these things.
No, not all of them.
No, not at all.
Not all of them.
Which ones did they vote on?
White Pond,
White
the sustainability
Pond,
director, that's
General
all.
and sustainability director, so that comes up to be about $161,000.
40 of it and then necessary.
41, 120.
So what if we were to take
And the
those,
parks and playground is what it's
that money and add that
To the middle.
to the million?
Or half of it.
It's already in there.
Or half of it.
Some of it's in there
I would do
depending on the
half.
column.
Or half of it.
Make them come up with the other half. Just do this.
So 161 plus what was Phil's number for a 2% increase, what would that wage number be instead of 950? It would be,
So I'm not quite sure how to
Saved,
calculate.
we were saving 160,000.
We usually do.
We're saying, but we need the 41 for the sustainability.
so about 800.
We need the 100 for the maintenance stuff for Jura.
So
We need 20.
That's really not for Jerome, that's just because we have more land now.
Okay.
We keep buying land, so that's true.
you may have to pick and choose between the columns, but
But that looks like what we're doing.
So Phil, what did you say?
My proposal was adding 40,000. You would get that, you can get that a number of ways. I just did it by reducing the 3.5% increase in non-union to 2%.
And then we only hire one new park maintenance.
Well, yeah, that's Christine was saying we cut it in here. The school resource officer, we voted for that.
Yep, oh yeah, we voted
That was
that.
a special town meeting, so there's 171.
So, in the needed column, the 2 new park maintenance and White Pond operations need, what is the $100,000?
the two park maintenance people.
And
Headcount.
what is that? What are
The
those?
mowing fields,
What?
the like mowing the fields, handling,
They said they added a substantial amount of acreage to, I can't remember.
oh
what they
yeah,
called
and
it,
even
but-
NRC type projects that they can't get them all done. You know, you have people to do them and they would spread it out over more months than just the summer. So dealing with all the land acquisitions, but
So the voted items are the sustainability, 41.
Yep.
The parks and the 2 new maintenance people,
I'm not
100.
sure that that's the vote.
Well-
That's just because we bought some land and so
Okay,
this
we
is,
did vote
this is,
for
it is
the-
driven by the fact that we are now very land rich and have a lot more things to take care of.
Go ahead, and the White Pond
And White.
White Pond,
and the school resource officer.
Where are you seeing the White Pond?
White Pond operations.
It's
is
in the
the
needed
parks and
column.
playgrounds,
Right.
it's 100.
Chris is
But, you know, right, yeah, but that isn't all White Pond. When we voted for White Pond, we knew there were gonna be additional expenses.
Exactly.
And,
The goal
but
is
all,
to
that
have,
whole thing is for White Pond though.
the goal is to have the user fees cover operating expenses at White Pond, but while they're getting up to
State
speed,
money for this year,
Okay.
yeah.
we voted to
but the
fund
100
their
isn't, the 100 is not just White Pond.
Right, yeah, yeah,
Right.
And Chris has that in a lower priority column than
true, yes.
the bodies that are already hired and have to be paid for. So,
And then the school resource officer, 10,000.
That's right.
so actually hired are 10 for the school resource officer and 41 for the sustainability person. And then the other things in the needed that are salary type items are for new hires. And then there's some new hires in the needed column, but they're not actually on deck. So voted for and implemented is 51 of the necessary column.
Did they already purchase the second ambulance?
No, well, they
Yes.
have the second
Oh,
ambulance,
yes.
they can't staff it 24/7, they staff it 7 by 12. And these extra 4 staff would take on the other 12 hours a day and reduce the response time in West Concord area. There's a lot of housing over there, there's been a lot of increase in population in West Concord, so it's 2 minutes to 3 minutes more if the thing has to drive across from the Concord Fire.
But we get to the hospital faster.
Whatever.
Because it's in West Concord.
Yes.
Yes.
They do, okay. That's the needed response. Okay,
Okay,
just trying to move this
where are we?
along,
What
where
does
are
that
we?
number
Exactly.
add?
Carrie's coming in.
Well, we don't really have a motion on the table, what we have is some numbers that have been thrown around, and we don't, so, what we're seeing in this budget, I'm just gonna try to summarize, is we're actually seeing, this is not a level service budget, there are numerous headcount increases in this budget. You're adding, they're asking to add at the library, the town said we want a new resource officer, we're hiring new park maintenance staff, and these are ongoing expenses that we're gonna have going forward. There's also staff being added for the town manager support, a clerk, and people to manage senior service, requests. I don't know how to, characterize this as something that, this is not even close to a level service budget. We're increasing services for the town.
But some of them have been voted on.
Some of
Yes,
which
some
the
of them
town
have.
has said we want,
Right.
and the others are being requested due to requests that come in, like a senior person or a veteran who comes in and has needs. We need to save, we need to, help, and those requests are increasing.
This is
Veterans aren't in here today, but they were last year's. So it's, that's the only thing I have to say is that this is far from what we heard from the school system. This is way off in terms of, we're increasing services with this budget. And we just need to understand that.
There has been a principle that when things are voted at town meeting, we
Oh, yeah, we have to, that's the will.
consider them in our guidelines.
Absolutely, I think that's
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
Is there,
Board of Selectmen.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion. What I did is I went through and I added up the things that have already been voted by the town, and I came up with 171,000. And, which is the sustainability director, the maintenance staff, White Pond operations, and the resource officer. So these are things that the town has committed us to. And that's 171,000.
So I disagree on the maintenance staff, that's a request.
Well, let me finish.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm saying, I'm just throwing this out here. We cut that in half, and that would be the increase to the number.
Sorry, what are your numbers again? So the 41 for resource.
41 for the sustainability director, with 100 for the maintenance people for all the land we bought.
Yeah, but that's not voted.
That's not voted, it just
We
means.
have the land,
Let's humor
so we're just gonna let the land sit there. Okay, we voted to purchase this land. Okay, so I assume when we voted to
We didn't
purchase this
vote,
land, we meant.
But that 100,000 isn't just for the land.
I understand. I'm just saying, we made a commitment to buy this land, and I assumed that when I voted that I thought we would maintain it as well.
And we were told when we voted that we would have to maintain.
Okay, can I finish? Thank you. Okay, 100,000 there, 20,000 for White Pond operations, knowing that's temporary, and 10,000 for the school resource officer, which again, we voted a special town meeting. That comes up to 171. And I'm saying that we cut that in half and say, find savings somewhere else to fund this, and but we'll bump up the guideline to meet you halfway.
So you're like 80, you're looking at 85? What do you-
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's, yes.
I go with that.
And what are we talking about in the needed category?
Well, we're kind of ignoring the IT director.
That's all.
We're ignoring the IT director.
We're ignoring.
We're ignoring the support staff for seniors. We're not allowing the capital to increase the capital outlay budget.
He can use it however he'd like.
Right.
We're just coming up with.
Well, yeah, we're just saying, here's a number, you know.
Right.
It's just a way of increasing it because you're not dealing with the salaries at all.
That's right.
And the ambulance?
Yeah,
But
it's
it
not
is out on the
different.
table.
We,
It's what?
We're not.
we're not
We're not
waging
funding
the
the
ambulance.
Okay, so it's not.
It's not, it wasn't something that was voted. In other words, we're looking at the things that the town has expressed.
Yep.
Its will.
Yep.
And these things are,
So if
these
you-
things.
So necessary means what?
He thinks it's.
No, is necessary like a must have
Yes, but it's not by
Town.
law.
But so
It
it's
was a
not
high
unless that
priority.
town.
Call it high priority.
It was a
Right.
high
It's-
priority.
it's
to the
It's
town.
his highest priority.
It's a non-discretionary item.
No,
No, it doesn't.
like having an IT
Okay.
person at the library is
It's his top
discretionary.
priority.
He's just putting it in his highest
So
priority.
it's high priority, okay.
Right.
Needed is what?
A
Medium.
little
Medium
less.
priority
Okay. And unfunded
means
Low priority.
I'd like to have, I'm not asking
Comes
for
next
it.
to it.
I just want to make sure I understand what these definitions are. Because we keep jumping from one
See,
bucket to
We are,
another.
we're cherry picking out of
It's
one.
really confusing.
Hey,
Brian, we did a different cut, which is we put it into things that have already been, voted at town meeting and things that weren't.
No,
So we're adding
I heard that and I appreciate that. I just want to make sure I'm clear about,
What
his
he-
priorities.
his priorities, yeah.
all right.
Okay, so,
We are ignoring things like the salary. So if we really want to do this on a principal basis, we should figure out what's needed in the salary.
okay.
Okay.
So we had that up before with, Carrie had the those three
340,
figures, 440, 330, and
Bring that
220,
back.
something like
There
that.
they are.
So we said the first two buckets are done deal.
So you add 60 to that, 60 is your number, and I bet if we do that, we're actually below the 1 million that we've already voted.
Yeah, what are you doing with the three?
Yeah, if you take 80 plus a smaller bump, then
Nothing?
You give
Huh?
What are you doing with the
So the
340?
current guideline could
No,
say,
I would just say that's not necessary, it's not absolutely necessary, right?
The 340 is optional, really?
Yes.
It is,
yes.
so you zero it out.
So, or you could do half of that or something like that, but you're not dealing with it. You're dealing with that.
I see what you're saying, yep.
So your number is what, 168?
Well, 171 divided by 2, it's 85.
85
Go ahead.
plus 660, so that is only $745, $745,000, right? So we're way below the million.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So we can add to that.
Except you can't zero out the 340.
Why?
Well, that was right.
Because
So,
you
Yeah.
have to give people,
No, and I guess this, I understand that, but why, I guess, non-union workers versus union workers, the composition of the non-union population, is it, who, what type of worker is that, in terms of like,
Office workers. It's office workers.
Well, I don't know, but I can tell you this, it would be very easy for them all to be union workers.
well, little by little, they have
no, fair, and it's a fair point, but my question is, if we're level setting them up to union wages anyway, aren't,
No,
it's the same.
no. We're not
We're
giving
treating
them,
them
no, we're giving them the same percent increase. That's
Right.
different than level setting
Right,
them up
it's
to.
it's an issue of
Okay,
equity.
okay.
Right.
It's also, as the town manager has explained, an issue of being able to attract people.
And retain them.
Okay.
And retain them.
I'm
It's a tight labor market.
Yeah,
no,
We know
fair.
that.
So I'll just tell you, if you add a 2% increase of, instead of 3.5, which is what 340 is, and you add that to your number, it comes, and those other two non-discretionary numbers for salaries,
Yep.
it comes to 939. So it's below
We're
this.
still under the number.
What happens if you do 2.5%?
2.5% is the 950.
That's the 950?
No, it's 2.5% for the 340.
right, you're just reducing the 340. But that's, I think that's what the comment in the box says. Decrease non-union request from 3 to 2.25 moves it down from 1,887 to 950. I think that's what that implies.
Yeah.
So what it's implying is
So
that that's
we're-
already a 2.
Right, already, the 950 is already.
How many employees are we talking about in that non-union bucket?
Don't know.
Like 80 or so?
If you do a 2% increase to the 340, by my calculations, and your number, it comes to 987. Or 988.
So let me make sure I understand what you're saying. You're saying we could fund these increases due to things the town's voted if we decrease the percent increases for both union and non-union? Just non-union.
Just
To-
non-union.
to what?
2.5%.
To 2.5.
Yes.
Sort of taking this out of the back.
Right.
Just because you can.
Right.
Well, it's still 2.5%. It's still 2.5%. For Martin.
I just,
What is the union increase
I
going
thought it
to?
was 2.5% across the board.
This is 950.
Well, we're looking at a million on the spreadsheet on the screen.
The union increases are locked in because of contracts.
What are they?
13.5%, 440.
So it's
440,000.
Oh, yeah, but I meant 90% of their salary.
I think it's 2.5.
So it'd be 290 in non-union to bring it to Chris's 950 on this sheet.
That's where the
What-
50,000 came out.
So this sheet shows 950 for salaries.
Right.
What we've got up on the screen is a million.
Oh, yes,
should've
right.
done that
They took
20 minutes
50,000. Yeah, so I'm sorry, yeah, it would be a little bit over, 988, so it would be another 50,000. So, 1.037, or 1.038. So that gets you to close to 40, which is what I was trying to add 38,000 to this, with Mary's, to get them to 2.5%.
So you're saying that you would bump up the million to 1,040,000?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mary, when you were going through the stuff that was voted,
Yeah.
what made you pick 50% of that number?
I just said meet him halfway, it was just a split.
Phil Solomon maneuver.
But it seems like if something's voted and it needs the funding, to say 50% of it will give you,
We're kind of saying,
Yeah.
find some savings.
that's not really funding it.
Right, it's
No,
not
no,
funding
we're
it.
saying.
Well,
you
10,
find-
40, and
We're saying
20.
take it from somewhere else.
We are. Then, yeah.
Maybe we should go back and, there is one thing that we can cut in half, because I think it is somewhat discretionary, and that is the 2 conservation officers.
Yes.
Yep.
I cut that in half,
Okay,
and I came up with 121.
yes, you're right, 121. So,
That was the way I was approaching the whole thing. It's like,
Yeah, no.
okay, maybe you don't need
Okay.
2 staff.
that
maybe you
makes
got-
sense.
Okay.
So we're at 121,
So that
And-
adds another 50.
Well, that adds another 50 if you're changing salaries, right? The
You're
raises.
changing salaries by 2.5%. The non-union salaries.
so wait, Phil, right now, the number is 950, assume the 2.5% for both union and non-union.
That includes 3.5%.
No.
No.
950 says in the marginal note that moves the number for non-union workers down to 2.5%. So that's
It's already
already
there.
at 2.5.
I think Kara told us earlier, that was really that number of, what was the number, 440?
340.
340.
340.
340 was a 3.5%.
No.
So
Yeah, I know the 950 includes a 2.5%.
Okay, so there's not a lot of wiggle room there.
Yeah, there's no wiggle room.
Yeah, exactly.
You come in
Plus
and-
3.5%.
Okay, so we've already taken that.
We've already taken it.
Okay, so we're at 121.
121.
And if you take 121 plus the 950, we're at what?
So
1061,
107.
107.
I mean, that seems more logical to me, rather than trying to split. I prefer Dean's suggestion that we don't consider the second head count for the parks,
Yeah.
because that's at least logically tied to a head count, and then we fully fund.
IT. That gets us down to below our guideline.
Yeah, but he'll then pick and choose off the needed column. So you're saying that we're just working for necessary.
Yeah.
Right, the needed column is what we need, see, he needs White Pond, and he probably needs staff member
Staff member where?
for the maintenance of the land.
The 20.
Well, you have 20 for White Pond, but also he's got 2 staff members.
And then, and up above, but
That was not voted, but we did buy the land.
We did have land.
But is the full 100,000?
No, I'd cut that in half and just say have all one. But I don't
If
even
we
know
cut,
if
if we cut that in half, we're down to 121.
we- yeah.
And then if we
Less
add
than
950 for the
Salary.
salary increases, we're at 1,071,000.
171, so we started at 1 million
Yeah.
flat,
So we're 71,000.
and we're 71,000.
So what does that put us if you do like 1.07?
Can you put that in for us, Kurt? It's really a sausage.
We took out the capital outlay credit.
Yes, we did.
Senior
We
service.
So
took out-
the increase in capital outlay, not the.
Yeah, planned
Yeah,
increase.
It's just an increase.
We took out the
Landed.
IT.
71.
71.
So they're at,
And if they don't hire 2 maintenance workers and they want an IT person.
That's
percent.
his choice.
So,
And we took out the IT that.
it's IT. I mean,
So we're
what's comfortable?
71,000.
You don't look comfortable with this?
No, I'm not comfortable. I mean, we're scratching down from close to 60%. So, and I just want to see what shakes out if we take out, make 100 for 2 people, 50,000.
We did.
We
We
did
did
that.
that.
You eliminate the IT person.
We
Right.
did that. We eliminated everything.
Did you eliminate the HR person?
Yeah.
Yep.
So what we did was, here's what we only added in. We said 41 for the sustainability director, 1 maintenance person,
50,
50,
Right.
20 for the White Pond startup.
Gotcha.
Startup year, and 10, what was 10? 10 is the resource officer, which is voted at town meeting.
Oh, yes, okay.
Okay, so the only one that's not voted is the 50 for a maintenance
Where does
worker.
it get us?
And then you add the salary needs, which is 950.
Okay.
And that gets you to 1,071,000. And we started this at 1 million.
Yeah, but according to, if we bump down the non-union increase to 2%, then we can save an additional,
I'm not in
not-
favor of that.
And not,
down to 2%?
no, I'm not.
No, I agree.
He's already gone from 3 to 2.5.
Yeah.
So what does that do for us, Carrie?
Well, 1,071.
if you add 70, she added 70, 71.
Yep, there you go.
So what falls out?
4.14 for the town and
3.58, that's a big nut.
So the tax increase would be 3.3 and change.
Yeah, 3.3.
Probably about 3.33.
What it costs?
I'm going to make a motion
Yeah.
that we increase our guideline amount to 1,071,000 for the town budget.
Do I have a second? I second it.
Okay, any further discussion on this?
Just a point of clarification, are we reducing the non-union?
No.
No.
Well, we're not, the town manager can do.
No, but within the context of what we just.
Yes, the
We filed the
9.1
warrant
is
article
included
already.
in 2.5, as he
But-
recommended.
It's our recommended guideline. Any further discussion? Okay, we're ready for a vote.
Yeah, no,
All those in favor of
Sure,
1,071,000?
fully understand.
Okay, it's not unanimous. So we need to count here.
Got it. 11.
11. All those opposed? 1. And no abstentions. So
We have a guideline.
we have a guideline. So, great. So this is actually, we're going to bring the guideline subcommittee meeting to a close with the recommendation to the full meeting for a full guideline increase of 3.58% for the operating budgets subdivided
as 4.42, 2.61, and 4.44%, as shown on the screen right now.
Dean, do you need to have a motion to close out that guideline subcommittee?
I probably need a motion to close the subcommittee hearing. Okay.
Second.
All in favor? All right, now we're on to this. Tom, I'm going to hand it back to my chair. He's got big business ahead. There's all kinds of things still on the agenda, right? Just that we as a committee have to do something summary.
So the first thing to tackle is,
Gary, can you leave that up for just a second? Because I think we need just a formal vote of the finance committee to, and I'm going to move that we as the finance committee accept the recommendation of ourselves.
okay, so I'll entertain a motion that we accept the guidelines committee's recommendation.
So moved.
Second? Second. Any discussion? Ready for a vote? All in favor? It's unanimous. Any opposed? No. Okay. All right. So moving on, the third item on our agenda is discussion and vote on sustainable growth rates for fiscal year, and it really should read fiscal 21 through 25. Okay. So the third from the last page in your handout packet is a copy of the email that I sent out yesterday. And this is, these are for discussion. Has everyone had a chance to read the email, become familiar with the ideas that are expressed here? Okay. So what this is proposing to do is to undertake a three-step process which would launch us on a permanent, one hopes, change to the way in which the Finance Committee sets its guideline. And this process would involve first placing an article in the warrant for the 2019 town meeting, which, are there people in the audience who would like to see? I don't know whether we have enough copies of this. You've got copies?
Carry some.
Oh, Maureen needs one. And, Carrie's going to make some more copies so everybody gets a copy. Right, so the first step would be to place an article in the warrant for the 2019 town meeting, which would propose a process by which each year, during our February hearing cycle, at one of the 5 hearings that are already set, 3 of which are conducted by the Finance Committee, we would have a public discussion of what would comprise our guideline for the fiscal years 2021 through 2025. And we have already discussed at our Monday meeting what some potential indices that we would peg that sustainable growth rate to might be. And we will come out with some answer in those hearings, which will then supplant let me make sure I don't want to get myself confused and everybody else confused. So then there would be a separate warrant article, which would use plug numbers that we would probably decide on tonight or at our next meeting, which would be a placeholder for the numbers that we will decide at the February hearing. Then at town meeting, the town meeting would review that number, the guideline, which would then be a series of 5 recommended sustainable growth rates, and it would vote them up or down. One would hope that they would vote for them. So I think that really lays it out. Phil's ready to jump on the mic here.
I am.
Please do.
So I think it's a great idea to set a sustainable growth rate, but I don't think we need to have town meeting warrant articles to do it. I think it's within our own authority and discretion to do that on our own. And I just think that town meeting could devolve into just debate, endless debate about which index to use and all sorts of other factors that you don't really need to involve, because in the end, this is just a guideline for the sustainable growth rate. It's not like we're asking town meeting to decree that there shall be no increase over the guideline. So we're just creating an extra step that might every year be something that we don't want the town meeting to decide. Like, people will come to the town meeting uninformed and maybe not make the right decision either. So, not that, I think town meeting makes great decisions generally, but sometimes on things like what index to use or guideline to use, it could be done, may not come out so great. So I think we should just set up, this is an internal policy that we'll follow, but we don't need to involve town meeting.
So if I may, I'll answer that question. There has been an undercurrent in these meetings and outside the meetings, heard from other people, to the effect that the official charge of the Finance Committee is to act as advisor to the town meeting on fiscal matters. And fiscal matters at town meeting. So one of the reasons I believe it would be a good idea to have this voted on at town meeting is because we would then be fulfilling our formal charge, making a recommendation to the town on a fiscal matter, and the town would then be voting on it. The second reason I think it would be beneficial is there would have been a discussion, a public discussion, both at our hearing and at the town meeting, and if it's voted, there would be buy-in from the town. People would be focused on the idea of a financial trajectory for the town, and there would be some investment in the idea that that should be the number we should be using as our goal. And it's not a minimum, it's a maximum number we're asking the budgeting entities to shoot for. So for those two reasons, I think it would really be a good idea to have a hearing and go before the town meeting.
To Phil's point, all this debate that the town meeting would have would be about something that is essentially still advisory. It's not going to fix what the amounts could be. That would be still the vote.
That's true.
Of
That's
the
true.
budget
And they could then, the town meeting in subsequent years could vote to spend more than their own sustainable growth rate advisory. And maybe they will.
Why?
Why would they? Or why do it?
Yeah. Why? I mean, yeah. I mean, I think if it's just going to be advisory, we're doing advisory already.
Right.
We internally can put out the policy that we think is the right policy and follow that policy. But I mean, the town will know what the policy is, and they will be voting on the actual budgets.
So the two most important things I see in this exercise are one, that it's forward-looking, that it goes out 5 years in the future, and thereby will be able to affect the negotiation of collective bargaining agreements. But
it's still really only advisory.
it is. But the other thing, which I think may be even more important, is it is going to focus attention in town on this issue in a way that I don't think it has ever been focused before. And the whole idea of looking out 5 years and contemplating what the effect of the result of our collective bargaining agreements as they roll through our history is on what we pay for taxes. So on those two grounds, so
So I,
So-
can I?
Wait a second,
Sorry.
June.
Okay, sorry.
So, ballpark estimate, we meet 20 times a year in a public forum where interested parties could jump in and witness and participate in the dialogue. So we're already out here in a forum where people have the opportunity to provide input. It is advisory, and we certainly could make a reasonable request that at town meeting that we give a very short presentation of what the forward-looking five-year numbers are based on where the markets and the inflation experience have been, and use that as an opportunity to get up and set expectations that barring significant changes in the economy, this is what we're looking at. But one, there's the issue that we have a lot of very educated, articulate people who could get in, we could be caught up in very long conversations about which index and why. And then as well, there may be people who are forward-looking to projects that they want to see move forward that would use that as an opportunity to debate the number in year 3 or year 4, and that our ability to use this to shape the shift of the curve so that we're growing at a rate that says that the doors of Concord are open to people whose incomes are growing with the median or the mean.
Yes, or we also get, I remind people, we get a lot of inane comments at town meeting too. And there may be people that are not informed and come up with some other thing, some other reason for why their index should be that way. So I just, this is an advisory group, I think that's our purpose. We don't need to have town meeting vote on our advice.
Andrea, okay.
Oh, at the risk of asking a dumb question, let me preface this, but in theory, in principle, I agree with what you're saying. I think all of the public meetings that are held do not get the coverage, and the word does not get out that there's even a hearing, except to a very, very small motivated percentage. I think town meeting is covered a lot more. However, at town meeting, people vote up or down.
Or
So
they
what
can
if
vote
the
to
whole
move
thing
it.
is
They can vote
voted
to
down?
change it.
That means we can't do what we've been talking about trying to do, even in our own meetings, because the town has voted it down.
Yeah, they can vote.
But I
no.
do agree with you that getting it out there at town meeting would be great. I just don't know how to do that so that
We have a drum roll.
without getting into the nitty-gritty of how to, the indices, all this stuff, which I don't
I would
understand.
imagine that if town meeting voted it down, we would then be free to follow the usual practice we follow, which is to write our guidelines later on July 1st.
Right, but we want to change that.
We would like
So
to, yes.
what is the best way to get the word out to the most residents of Concord,
Put it in the FinCom.
but not
Everybody gets it.
handcuff us and let us move forward with what we've been working on? I don't have the answer to that. I'm just putting that out.
So I have a couple comments. The first is, this is very new, and I think that as a policy, we should probably put some training wheels on it and do it as a committee for a few years. See how it's received, see whether it benefits the town, see if the budgeting entities that we engage with, treat it with respect, or, somehow it informs how things are done. But after a few years of it being a policy of the FinCom and just something that we're doing as an internal exercise, we can think about whether or not we need the further imprimatur of town meetings. So that's my first inclination, is to have that. This is all new. I think it's great, but I think we'll probably need a couple of years to see how it rolls, whether it's useful. But the other thing about going to town meeting is you birth a baby at town meeting you have no idea how it's gonna come out. So you put 3.5% on the floor, and it could come back 5, and it could be modified, and it could be amended, and then that would be what it is. So the exercise and the work that we've put in to coming forward with what we think is a prudent number is subject to any emendation that anyone wants to offer. And I find that to be, just basically undermining everything we're trying to do. So that's where I'm fearful that it's not going to be treated by the town as an up or down vote. It will be subject to a lot of debate that is probably not that helpful, because those people are just coming to that one meeting where we've spent months trying to get to what we think is the number, and then the wheels fall off the bus. So I'm just concerned and would like to see us do this for a few years internally before we then roll it out.
Is there any way, any mechanism at town meeting to make a statement that this is what the plan of this is what the finance committee is going to be doing?
I'll try to answer that, and I don't know if I've got the perfect answer, but I think Carmen has ruled that unless we have a warrant article, we don't have the floor. And the warrant article has to be something that the town can make a decision about. It can't just be, I want to make a presentation and then sit down and there's no vote. Or he doesn't really work that way.
Can we talk to her
But
about that?
we do make a statement about each of the
We do,
budget.
right. We could take
And
those
so we have three
opportunities, and we got 3
Say the same
opportunities,
thing
3 times. We could.
We could also use
We
every
could.
request for debt as an opportunity, can't we,
Yeah.
for non-guideline spending?
Yep.
So
I mean, could,
we can always, the
Right.
moderator will allow us to be on the agenda of the town meeting if on an article. So
Yep.
we say we want to be heard on the first article that comes up that our guidelines are affected by. Usually it's the town budget.
Yep.
So normally the moderator just announces the FinCom supports this article, right? But we'll say, no, we don't want to do that this time. We want 5 minutes or 2 minutes,
Right.
whatever it is. But the chairman of the FinCom gets up and says, we're announcing our, drum roll, our sustainable growth rate is 2.5%. It's based on the Consumer Protection Index and the 10-year Treasury bond.
Probably
And-
slides.
And,
Oh, yeah, you could
You have
have
slides?
Absolutely.
here's why. And so you take your 5 minutes or 2 minutes, whatever you get. So the whole town meeting hears it. And if necessary, we can do the same thing on the school budget, CCRSD budget. But the point is that she'll let us make a short presentation. And so we'll get it in front of everybody. And it'll be in the report before that.
I think then we're still reacting, right? I think it's valuable to do this because instead of us reacting 20 times, right? This is really flipping it. And what is the vote? I think there's an education component, right? Which is, I think nobody comes to these, special hearing things, right? 2 people, whatever. So I think the audience is there. And I think if we get in front of it, and maybe it's what is the vote? I think we have to have a warrant article, right, to get on it. I think is it a show of support by the town in the process we're using to establish it? Maybe that's it, right? Which is, this is what we're planning on doing. We're planning, instead of year by year, looking after the fact at budgets that presented to us, and they vary like this all over time, getting ahead of it and saying, we're going to try to take a longer view, establishing a number based on data, right, which is a novel concept, but we've never done it, right? Data that's outside of what the individual budgets are, that's a huge change. And maybe we do a trailing 1 year, 5 year, whatever, but because we don't want our number to go like this over time too, right? So I actually think but the concept that we will set a guideline based on data, historical data over some period of time, that we're going to, and it's still a year in advance, right? Because if this is town meeting, next town meeting would be for the following budget season, right? So basically we're showing our cards, but educating the town that we're looking at data, we're going to put the number out there, And we ask for, I guess the vote would be to vote, supporting our using this process, right? And the numbers can change over time, except if you do like a 5-year trailing weighted average, they're not gonna change that much, right? Because you're dropping 1 year, you're dropping the lease. So then I think and if we explain the process, and if we get a vote of support from the town, then as our superintendent and town manager go and negotiate, you have the town's backing of our process, right? Where right now we have zero, all the town, if I'm negotiating against unions or something like that, the town votes yay, and all the things, right? What we're trying to do, I think, is flip it and saying we should base those decisions based on it. And it's really arming our negotiators with the support of the town that here's a number, it's based on good process, it's based on data, it's not getting flipped all over the place, and it helps our superintendent, town manager negotiate and manage their budget. So I think there's a huge, instead of reacting to 20 different articles, I think it's important, because then what happens? Either the town's going to say, so I think it gives us a place to actually make our case that we care about long-term, this is what we think, we're tying it to something. Do you guys agree with our process or not? If they say yay, great. If they say no, okay, then what are we doing, right? But if they say yes, then we have the support, and we have a number that Dr. Hunter and town manager can use internally. It puts us, I think it gives us the credibility to do what we're doing. Otherwise, we're doing line item vetoes, responding all the time. So I think it gets ahead of it. What's the downside? And again, people can, and it's still advisory. We're not committing to the number, but we're asking for the town's support in the way we're approaching it, I guess, which I think that's important.
I wanted to just say, I think Dean's view is, in my view, the most strategic, because if the ultimate goal is to have people pay attention and to have it be a way to get ahead of things, I think you can quickly torpedo that by coming out prematurely when you yourself don't have strong views on we don't even know really what the numbers, the pro forma numbers might be yet. We do. We have some idea, right? But we don't know what the impact of that is over a 2 or 3 year period. We don't know how that's going to match up against guidelines we've already set or that have been set in the past. People will ask that question, right? I mean, I think we should work with it internally if it's within our scope, which I'm probably the least familiar with what that scope actually is, but if it's in the form of a guideline, why not go out with it as publicly as we can, but not putting it to a vote, and see how that plays out after 1 or 2 years, and then perhaps make it a more formal warrant where the town can actually adhere to it. When people are comfortable with it, when they see that it makes sense, that it's consistent with the guidelines that are actually being put out.
Well, I do like Dean's principle of, as he so colorfully put training wheels on it and try it out for a couple of years.
Training wheels on the bus.
Right. But I think rather than doing it internally, we should put the training wheels on the formal process and just view it as an experiment that we're going to do for 1 or 2 or 3 years and see what happens. Hold up the public hearing in February as a part of one of our already scheduled public hearings and invite the public. And as Phil says, we have many very smart people in this town. You don't invite everybody to come and speak for 15 minutes. They'll get 2 minutes to speak. Who knows? Somebody might have a much better idea than the ones that we floated around this table. And I, for one, would like to hear what they are, but reserving the right to do it the way we collectively want to do it as the Finance Committee. If we hear some better ideas, we can adopt those. If not, we can use CPI and the 10-year T-note, if that, the yield on the 10-year T-note, if that's what we decide we want to go with. But I really think that the process described here is one that is going to get a lot of public attention. And I think that's what we really want for this process, is public attention. We want people in town to really be focused on this idea, to be forward-looking about where we want the finances of the town to go over the next 5 years. Another beauty of this is it would change every year. If indicators change, that 5-year number would change annually.
If they approve this technique.
If we go,
Which we haven't voted on.
if we use this
No, I
process.
mean, if they
but
approve, if this is the index that people choose and don't amend it, and
It could be,
I mean,
it could be amended on an annual basis. We
Well,
could
it
have a
could be-
hearing
it
every
could be
year.
amended in town meeting though, the first time we go out.
Well, that's something I would like to
I-
explore. I don't know whether it's possible to have an article that is structured such that town is saying yes or no. And
No, because they can always
It can always be amended.
You're always allowed to amend an article on the floor.
It's unlike Congress.
But we don't have to be locked in, right? It could be, if we could ask for support from the town to this general principle, right? The only, and our first crack at what a metric is, it's an average between the CPI and the 10-year note, 5-year weighted average, right, 5-year average. That specifics could change over time, right, from FinCom, but it's the buy-in to a long-term principle, I think is, to me, the important point, because whether you use CPI or growth in regional wages versus, who cares? I mean, no, who cares, but it's the principle that you're relying on something external to the town of Concord that we're going to consider, right, is for guidance. This exact number may change, but to me, I think the important thing is the town, that we get support from the town, that makes sense to the town, and that we ought to do it, right? The actual gauges could change, and I think that's okay. And I think, so, and we can even word it that we're gonna use something initially set as this, but subject to change. So it's not, if in fact it changes over time, I think that's okay, but it's basically having the town, see the light of day, right? Our 5-year forecast and our deliberations, raising it to a point that's really visible, that we explain as a warrant to the town, that they say, yeah, that seems reasonable to me or not.
Well, then it puts forward in a public way, if we value affordability and economic diversity, then we need to start reining in the rate at which we grow. And then we have a very public conversation on, if we're growing faster than wages and inflation for the region, and those are, the wages for the mix of jobs in our region, that, it helps us, budget in a way that reflects that shared value.
I think that the policy that we've been proposing on the surface is sort of motherhood and apple pie, right? It's fiscally prudent, and so it makes a lot of sense, and we have a lot of those kind of conversations here. I think when you get to the details of what does it really mean, so if we go out and we say that number is 2%, it's actually less than 2% based on the 5-year average, and if you compare that to what we've been doing, there's a huge difference, right? It's double, triple what we've been doing. Right. So people will immediately get to, oh, wait a minute, wait a minute. You're really talking, when you want to bend that curve, you're talking about taking budget growth increases in half. And so what does that mean to services, and what does that mean to school? And you're immediately going to get to a pretty controversial place. So even though I think fiscally it sounds like a good idea, I think it's going to be very controversial in about 5 minutes, because it won't be lost on people that bending the curve has some real implications for services in the town. So I think you have to be really ready for that if that's what we're going to do, because this is not going to be easy. And we don't have, what's the boogeyman? So in my personal experience, when you want to drive change, and that's what we're talking about, right? This is big change in how we budget. You need a boogeyman, or it's very helpful to have a boogeyman, to have your pants on fire about something. And maybe we do, because you have a school budget that's pretty tight, and they're eating into their reserves. We know we aren't even covering the stuff that people are voting for at town meeting, capital projects, so we have a disconnect in our budget process that's not very healthy.
We have bond rating potential issues. It's not very good. We have OPEB. We're not going to fund it. We have some things to talk about that could say, let me tell you why our pants are on fire on this subject. But sometimes that's a longer conversation. You have to get people with you to say, yeah, my pants are on fire. I don't know that they're going to immediately go for, oh yeah, we need to lower this right away. I think it's going to be the start of a dialogue. And one of the things that I think about that we could use beyond town meeting, because I agree people don't come to the hearings, is the press. Is start to have some conversations with the Concord paper about, or wherever you get in front of them, and say, let's start having a dialogue, because people do read the paper about what's going on fiscally in the town, and maybe start to create share with them some of the concerns we have as a committee that would lead one to a fiscal policy like we're talking about.
So I have another thought, doesn't involve training wheels. That is, right now, we already have something that was mandated by town meeting that we do. We haven't engaged with it yet this year, and that's the 5-year tax projection. It's a simple bylaw that demands of us some piece of our finance report show what we think the future of taxes is going to look like. What if we were to just make a simple proposal this year at town meeting where we amend that guidance, that one bylaw change, and just amend it with a simple thing, and the finance committee shall publish annually, a 5-year sustainable growth rate for our taxes as guidance to the town as it says its budget. It doesn't say how we do it. It doesn't get into the weeds of policy or mechanisms or methodologies.
It doesn't have town meeting vote on it every year.
It doesn't have town meeting vote on it every year, but it says to the town this year that the finance committee will be charged with doing this, creating this sustainable growth rate on an annual basis. We want to hear from you about the 5-year idea that you have. It doesn't tie our hands in any way. It gets us where we want to go, which is to get involved in this regular policy process. Nobody told us how to create a 5-year tax projection, and now we have this elaborate model which nobody understands. Carrie, are you on that? You're still here. It's a beautiful thing, but like only about 4 hands have ever been on it, and mine are one of them. But it evolved. It evolved from a very rudimentary 5-year tax projection to something very sophisticated and still not very accurate. But this would give us a very simple thing to ask town meeting. We think this is important. We want this to be part of our regular annual charge, and please vote to put this on. And I don't think it's going to be amended with, you have to use this methodology. It could be, but I think it's unlikely. We're just asking for something simple, that the finance committee be charged with having this be a part of their regular process. And then it's our job to, just like federal legislation, they leave the details of writing the regulations up to the administrator, up to us, and we figure out how we're going to do it.
How would we, that sounds great. How would we communicate that to the town?
Well, this year, I think we're ready to come out with an actual number, and we can, we can describe, what we've been through and say, here's the number for this year, and this is, where we are.
So
I don't know, it's just a thought.
I move that we adopt Dean's suggestion, which would be to propose a warrant article this year's town meeting to amend is it a bylaw?
My recollection is that Phoebe had brought a citizen petition because people wanted to know, what does this mean for our taxes? And so it's a very simple, it's part of the introductory material, it's 1 page. It can't be more than 2 sentences. It just says you're going to provide, the finance committee shall provide a 5-year tax projection. That's all it says. And we can just say, and shall also provide a 5-year plan for sustainable growth rate of the tax rate.
Okay, so my motion is that we propose a warrant article this year to amend whatever provision Phoebe Ham put forth, require us to project tax, 5-year tax rate to include what Dean said, which is a 5-year projection for the sustainable growth rate. Second.
Okay, so discussion.
Would this give us an opportunity at town meeting to talk about the trajectory of,
Yeah, that's the
Sure.
is that the whole?
Sure, we can do that
anyways.
We can do that.
Well, no, I heard that we had to have a warrant and.
No, we have the right to speak to any financial article. We can
Right.
step up and we can take 5
Okay,
minutes or
okay.
3 minutes and we can get our word out. It's not
But
going to
that's
be a problem. In any
reactionary
given,
to Scott's.
in any given year.
No, we want
can get our word out.
We're gonna do anything we want.
Use the bully pulpit.
Over
So,
20 articles.
Okay,
anyway.
okay.
I think your idea is a fine one as far as it goes. But
That's why I'm in the vice chair position as far as it goes.
I think it doesn't go far enough. I think
I know that.
we do. I think that there really is a tremendous benefit in having the public discussion about what this number is going to be on an annual basis and having the town buy into it. Now, I may be wrong. It may be a disaster. We may decide after 1 year, we all want to resign from the finance committee and never want to have anything to do with this again. But I personally think it's worth a try.
Well, nothing stops us from, going with the Dean plan and then holding a hearing about how it was set, et cetera, so you can give people an opportunity to be educated and comment as a part of the training wheel package.
Yeah, and nothing stops us from going further than what we will do with this motion in future years by asking the town to do what Tom is saying, which is vote on the rate. But you can start with just amending our charter under the Phoebe thing to include the sustainable growth rate, and then see how that goes. In future years, we may decide we want to go further and present the rate for approval to the whole town meeting. And there's nothing to stop us, with or without this year's motion, from having hearings on it to educate people.
I will vote against this because I think it's going to be like all of our other proceedings. It's going to be a big snoozer. I think it's going to provoke a massive yawn, and it's not going to provoke the public discussion that this issue really begs for.
But here's, Tom, I totally agree with you that I think if we can get town meeting to ultimately vote on a number or a process by which that happens and get their buy-in on it, it's so much more powerful than us coming with it. So I agree that it's worth taking that chance. But I do think this gives us a chance to kind of get our ducks in a row so that next year we come out with the right language, the right motion, so that it doesn't, at least we limit as much as possible all the possible impact that it could have. You could have the group show up that night that says we want a 6% growth rate because we know that's going to fund everything we want in the town schools. So I just think that I like Dean's proposal, but I do think we need to get to where you're going. I just think taking a year and doing some hearings in the meantime is the prudent path that makes sense. So.
What you're saying is to get the part of getting the process out there would work with Dean's proposal.
All my proposal does is it enshrines as a policy this idea that we're going to set this thing every year. It tells the town, look, we want you to make sure we're doing this each year, and you'll get a number from us as to what we think the sustainable growth rate of taxes is. And that binds over future FinCom members to have to engage in this. It's not just when we all roll off, it just evaporates. It now becomes a permanent thing. just like setting guidelines and just like setting creating a 5-year tax projection model are now enshrined. We do them every year. So that's all this does. It doesn't tell the town how we're going to do it, what the number's going to be, what indices we're using. It just says, you will do this, and then it's up to us.
But I wonder if we can't phrase it in a way that kind of provokes some discussion.
We can do
so
that.
we can test the waters to see kind of what
Yep.
the reaction may be and get better prepared.
The presentation to show
at
the
the town meeting could do that, right? So the way this would work under Dean's proposal is Tom would get up in front of town meeting and give a 5-minute presentation about this, why it's a good idea. And that presentation could start the conversation about what the growth rate should be and why. So it accomplishes everything, but it just doesn't subject to, to the 300 people getting up and saying, why we should be using this index or that index, or it really, all kinds of other reasons. Maybe people might say, if we start with this whole thing, including approving it this year, they may say we shouldn't be doing this because there's some good reasons not to have town meeting do this, because it might hamstring the budgeting entities too much. And they might say we prefer to let them have complete discretion. So I'd rather keep it sort of, let them buy into the idea of us doing it first, and then maybe in the future putting the numbers before them. You could even say in your presentation this year, if we were to follow the FinCom's recommendation, the number will be 2% or whatever the number is. You got figures there. Maybe you should tell us. What it would be.
Well, I understand that this is rather a big idea that only got presented to you yesterday, and that there may be some reluctance to act on it without thinking about it further. I certainly would have no problem putting this off until our meeting in December, but I disagree with Dean's proposal in that I think it strikes me as waiting another year, and it comes down to it, it's not really doing very much, I don't think. And so that's why I would vote against Dean's proposal. But that's all I have to
Are
say.
we waiting another year to do what
No,
you're suggesting?
we're doing it
We're waiting another year to hit the town meeting with all the details. But we're
That's the
not.
dean, the
The
dean.
motion is to
proposal.
hit the town meeting with a proposal to amend our charter.
Right,
So we're gonna hit the town meeting this year.
but we're not putting off doing what you're proposing.
We're just gonna do the slides with the numbers.
We're gonna do slides with.
But we're not asking for yay or nay on
We're
the
not,
number.
we're asking for buy-in.
We're
from
asking
the
for
town.
yay or nay on on
The
that
process.
we will,
That we'll do it,
that
that
we're
we'll
gonna
do
do
this.
internally.
That we'll just
fine.
do it.
And just FYI, here's what it looks like.
Here's what it looks
Here's
like.
what it looks like.
Here's what this is where we are now. This is what it looks like.
So it's first exposure. So it's,
Yeah.
one, they never heard sustainable growth rate at all,
Right.
right? So the whole process is brand new to everybody.
Yes.
And then we'll give our first snapshot. Today is this. Okay.
So there's a motion on the table.
Yeah.
There is a motion on the table.
Yes, so,
What motion
if
is
we're
it?
ready for a vote.
What's the motion?
It's Phil's motion.
Are we gonna talk any more about this
Well-
on the 20th?
If you
Well,
want
wait,
to.
right now Phil has a
We're talking
motion.
about the motion. So Phil, what's your motion?
Anita has it, I think, right? It's to amend our charter.
No.
Anita will straighten this out.
It's much longer than this. To bring a warrant article to town meeting to amend Phoebe Ham's
Take
vote,
that out.
which was about 8 to 10 years
It's
ago.
about,
And her vote requires the FinCom provide a 5-year tax projection report. And to include in that report, the FinCom include in that report the sustainable growth rate annually for the following 5 years.
Okay, thank you.
Something
That was
like
better
that.
than-
I didn't clean up the language, but that's in essence
Yes,
what you're voting on.
And if we, sorry, if we want to before you vote on that, if we want to extend that further, it could be presenting that number at a future town meeting, so that we have
It's
the
not part of
floor.
our motion.
I know, but I'm just, so,
Yeah.
I'm amending, right? So then it's, we do it and present in, was it now in the FinCom report?
It's not on the FinCom.
Could be to also present at the beginning of each town meeting our number to get, if the goal is to get more airtime.
Yeah, so.
Right, so I would
that be a
amend,
separate
I would
motion.
amend.
Codify airtime.
Right?
I don't know if you can bind over.
I don't accept your, Scott, I have tremendous respect for you, but I don't accept your amendment. I want to vote right now,
Okay.
just the one thing.
Well,
Yeah.
we can vote on this.
Or you can- How's that go?
That's in Robert's rules.
You can't stop me from it.
Did you make an amendment?
So I made an amendment to Phil's proposal, or motion, to add, and at each subsequent town meeting, present the sustainable growth rate.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
My only comment is, I don't know if we can bind over future town meetings to a process. I just don't think.
We haven't even voted. The other night, we made a motion, we voted, we have to vote that again tonight, okay? And you could maybe amend that vote. Let's get past this.
So let's, yeah, so I just
So
don't
the
think.
question, actually, since a motion to amend takes precedent over the original motion, so.
We have to vote on the
we
amendment.
have to vote on the
We have to
amendment.
vote on the amendment.
So Scott, given that it's not clear to me that your
You can do it.
your
If we can.
your amendment is practical, would you consider withdrawing it?
If it's not, if we can't, so
We
we
could
can
vote it.
require FinCom to put it in the report, but we can't require.
He required town meeting to open a slot for us to just talk.
Oh.
I don't think that's the
Okay.
thing. That, I'm not.
Okay,
But,
so
but Scott, you know, the,
that was the intent, anyway, the intent is airtime.
Yeah.
next year
So-
we have a motion to present our sustainable growth rate to the town meeting for
Fine.
approval.
So I
It's a
withdraw,
separate, I
I withdraw the
motion.
amendment. Yeah.
Okay, just before the vote, I just want to remind you all that I think this will require a 2/3 vote, will it not? Not here, I mean at town meeting, in order to change the bylaw.
You think it's a majority vote?
It's not a
Oh, okay,
zoning bylaws require.
Okay, all right. So, are we ready for a vote?
Yes.
Yes.
All in favor of Phil's motion? Any opposed? Abstentions?
So what would be the sustainable growth rate based on the indices we chose?
Today, it would be 2.95%.
I'm surprised it's that high. So the inflation rate is what?
It's 2.8, I think.
Oh, it is 2.8, okay.
So you did the single year.
You only did 1 year.
You did 1 year.
And what?
T-bill rate is higher.
3.1.
And you only did 1 year, Tom, right?
What's that?
You did 1 year.
1 year, no
I
5.
did 1 year,
So
12 months.
Did you talk, sorry, I missed Monday. Did you talk about doing the 5-year?
We talked about it, but we thought that the
We really-
5-year tail would be so bad because of the low interest rates that it would artificially suppress it right now.
Right now, but then artificially keep it higher in the future. So it would just,
It smooths it, it
it
does.
smoothed it, right? What about 3 year? What about 1 year?
We further figured that every year it's going to be a snapshot, and it's going to change every year. And a trailing 12 months seemed to us on Monday night to be adequate when matched up with the 10-year T-note yield as a prospective, as a leading indicator. So,
Then from a budgeting tool for town and schools, if the number can change dramatically from 1 year to the next, seems the shorter the window, the higher the beta in the figure and the less of a valuable tool from a planning standpoint it is.
So we may revise our thinking about it.
You thought 5 was too long.
Well,
It's one-
it's just that we're in an unusual period.
I know,
It's low-
but I'm thinking, you know, forever, right?
Yeah.
Which is, it's going to smooth it out,
It is gonna smooth
it's
it
going to
out.
lag both ways. It's going to lag on the up, and it's going to lag on the down, right?
Yeah.
So it's, is at some point when you have inflation up to 8% or whatever it is again, right? It's gonna, you're gonna be pulling
Are
some
we
history
discussing, are
along.
we discussing
The index.
the fiscal, the guideline?
The guideline.
And what we voted on, yes, Tuesday night, Monday night, and which was going to be brought up for a vote of the full committee
That's right.
tonight. So
That's right.
is
what we're discussing.
that on the table? Has it been brought up on the table?
So that is why, this is technically.
I'll move it, okay?
Wait,
Okay, Carl,
Whatever, okay. That we bring the recommendation from Monday night's meeting to, okay, here we go. That the guidelines subcommittee, well, they recommended that so that the finance committee, that the town adopt, oh, wow, this is, okay, anyway. That we adopt a sustainable rate of taxation growth as follows. The arithmetic average of the most recent 12-month CPI and the 10-year Treasury bill yield for our region that existed on the first day of July when the market is open. This would provide a growth number for each of the next 5 years, in other words, the same number, which would be updated on an annual basis for the upcoming 5 years. So it's a rolling 5-year, but it's the same number.
It gets revisited each year.
So that was the motion that was approved that we have to
approve.
approve tonight.
Again.
So I second Carl's motion, but I have a slight
It's
suggestion.
in the guidelines subcommittee meeting of the
to the
second
definition,
set of
right?
minutes from November 26th. I don't know where.
It's
I'm looking
right
for
here.
it myself.
It's on page 7.
Seven?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So my suggestion is the arithmetic average of CPI and 10-year Treasury bills should be changed to inflation rate based on CPI. Because I think the CPI is.
we just start over, Phil. Go ahead.
I'm just moving, Carl has basically moved that we approve this motion as written by the full
That we approved the
committee.
other night at the guidelines sub.
But I'm just saying we should amend the description of the average slightly from the average of the most recent CPI and 10-year Treasury bill yield to average of the inflation rate based on the CPI. Because the CPI is a number, right? It's not a,
You're right. You're exactly right. You're right.
Change in
It's an index.
Change.
Right, it is
It's
not
like-
a percent change.
the number of the CPI was
111.7.
So it should be,
Yeah,
right?
it was, 100 was 20 years ago,
Yeah.
and it's now 220 or something like
It
that.
should be the percent change
In
in
CPI,
CPI
yeah.
over the last
Great.
12 months.
I just call it the inflation rate based on the CPI.
I
Okay.
think that's a, do we?
Yes?
Yes, that's a great
Sure.
one.
Do we want to insert it's the regional inflation rate so that,
Yes.
Or is it regional CPI?
yeah,
Yes,
The
yeah.
inflation rate based on the
Both.
regional CPI.
Yes, exactly. So,
Okay, well, it says the 12-month CPI and the 10-year Treasury bill yield for our region.
well, the 10-year yield is
Is
for the
it, that's a,
nation.
that's a,
The
that
inflation
is one
would be
thing.
for the region.
we
right.
get
That's right, that's true.
Yes.
We move
I
for our
second it.
region
okay.
over to CPI.
Yes, and it should be, yeah, so it should be the inflation rate based on the 12-month CPI for our region.
The arithmetic average of the inflation rate of the most recent 12-month CPI.
Based on
Based on.
recent 12-month CPI for our region
Based on
and
the most recent 12-month CPI for our region and the 10-year. So you move it for our region over to come after 12-month CPI. And you're
that's
good.
probably what was said.
Yeah, it's close enough for government work.
Now, do we don't anywhere discuss the definition of the sustainable growth rate. So it says, that we adopt a sustainable growth rate, but we don't talk anywhere about it being.
Sustainability. Yeah, definitely.
Yes, it does, it
Well,
does.
the
This would
definition
provide-
is
okay, all right,
now
it's
the
in here.
formula.
Okay, it's in here, the second sentence. Okay. any further
Well,
discussion?
Carl, I think has accepted my proposed amendment, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have it here. I wrote it up.
So actually, the thing that we're voting on, this is, I guess I made the motion for this, so you have to vote on your.
No, you can
You
accept
can
it.
amend, you
Oh, I
can
can
agree
accept,
to
okay,
amend
fine,
your,
yeah, okay.
Amend your motion.
So that goes,
Anita, would you care to read
Yep,
that?
I did. I'm basically just moving the reference to the 12-month CPI and changing that to inflation rate based on the most recent 12-month CPI and moving it for our region next to the CPI
Correct.
rather than the T.
Correct.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay. Unanimous again. So, going back to our agenda, where's Terry? Well, what I was going to propose is that in the interest of time, we dispense, there was no correspondence other than the letter from the chair of the Carlisle Finance Committee. I am happy to dispense with my chair's report this evening so that we can all go get some rest. Anybody, assuming that Carrie comes back and she doesn't have anything pressing. Carrie? Do you? No. Okay, so I would accept a motion to adjourn. So moved. All right. Good night, all.